And if you still want to do this when you wake up, fine. But it's been hours. What if they were in trouble? I mean, obviously they were in trouble. I already felt guilty about having planned to take the time to look Cotgrave up on the internet. But I had to be absolutely sure it wasn't him out there in those woods. I'm not saying I wouldn't have gone out after him. I still would have, but I wanted something like a coroner's report, or at least his obituary that said he'd died and there was or wasn't a body. I just didn't want to be surprised. I realize this sounds bizarre, like it was going to be any better if Cotgrave was still alive or undead or whatever. But I don't know that I was thinking all that clearly. Somebody had sent for help and I had to help them because the note had come to me, and that made it my job because that's what my family does. Foxy rolled her eyes. If they were dangling off a cliff, they probably wouldn't have time to write a note. You aren't going to help anybody, herring off half exhausted. Take a nap, hun. But I said that to her shoulder blades. I appeared to be following her inside. I appeared, in fact, to be taking off my shoes and climbing onto the couch. Bongo hopped up next to me, delighted, and settled across my legs with a happy groan. Foxy flipped off the lights and said, "When you get up, we'll have lunch, and then we'll see what happens next." I slept for probably 3 hours. It was nearly noon when I woke up, and Foxy handed me a ham sandwich when I came out of the back room, and then another one down to Bongo. He was delighted to have another meal. I should probably have objected, but really I was about to drag him to God knows where. So it seemed like a stupid time to argue about eating people food. There was mayonnaise on the sandwich. Maybe when we met the holler people, Bongo's gas would knock them out. I went to the coffee shop, fired up my laptop, and deleted 90% of the emails, which seemed deeply unimportant now that I was probably going to die. Did I want to get involved in a fight about ebooks? I did not. There was an email in there from a name that looked very familiar. I couldn't place it until I clicked it, whereupon I realized it was from the ex-boyfriend I'd left town to avoid. He was apparently sending me a cautious, "It is possible he could have handled that better" overture. Jesus, of all the things I no longer cared about in the slightest. Well, I suppose there's nothing like stark blazing terror and the upending of your entire worldview to cure a broken heart. I deleted it. If I died, let them not find that in my inbox. The only really important emails were the ones to my authors. I'd gotten another delay on the one project, and that was good enough for me. I had done my due diligence. I'd waited patiently for more than 3 months at this point. I'd sent reminders. Now it was her fault for not delivering before I was killed by holler people. The other one, that was the one I felt guilty about. He'd paid the whole thing up front, and it was almost good enough, and I owed him a final pass. So I finished it off at breakneck speed and sent a note saying I thought it was good to go as it was. I was going to be out for a bit on some family stuff and not to wait on me if he was ready to publish. He was a nice client, and he was terribly insecure about his work, occasionally with good reason, and I didn't want to leave that loose end dangling. When that was done, I searched for Cotgrave's obituary. I should probably have done this days ago, but it simply hadn't occurred to me. He was dead after all, and if he wasn't, it wasn't as if a newspaper clipping would say, "Cotgrave's funeral faked today." I punched in his name and the town, and there it was, 3 lines down. 19 years ago, give or take a few months, his first name had been Frederick, which I vaguely remembered from his signature on the manuscript. He was a World War II veteran. Well, of course he was. Had he been Freddie when he was young? Drawing Kilroy on things, along with his fellow soldiers, Freddie Cotgrave, who saw all the horrors of war and still wasn't done with horror, who married one enemy to get away from another one. Poor sod. There was no cause of death, but there often isn't in an obituary. He died at home, it read. Granted, that made one think of dying in one's bedroom, not outside on a cold night, but still, he'd been on his own property, close enough. If I'd had a lot more time, I could have tried to find a coroner's report, check the cause of death, or whether there had been an inquest. There weren't any newspaper clippings from the day of or the day after that seemed to have any bearing on the matter. Even way out here in Ponsboro, an old man wandering away from the house and sitting down and dying wasn't much of a story, I guess. And that was it. Nothing much to show for a life. On a whim, I typed Frederick Cotgrave death into the search engine and waited. Nothing. Almost nothing. On the second page of search results after the obituary and an archive of the exact same thing and a bunch of websites that promised me they could find hidden records on anyone, I turned up a single link. The Society of the Embers of Dawn wrote that they were saddened to hear of the passing of their brother Frederick Cotgrave, who had been a member many years ago. I looked up the Society of the Embers of Dawn and sighed. "What's up?" asked Enid. "Why does every secret society have a crappy web page?" "Immutable law of the universe," said Enid. "I've thought of joining one sometime, just to fix their website, but I'm not really interested in knowing the secrets of the cosmos if it means I have to make web pages." I poked around the website, but it was a dead end. Literally. Half the links didn't work. It looked to have gone defunct not too long after the funeral, and I couldn't make heads or tails of what they actually were. Their website was doing a pretty good job of keeping things secret, anyhow. Odd people at the funeral, Aunt Katie had said. Well, maybe that was it. Maybe that's how he met Ambrose, or maybe he just joined for the dental plan. There was contact information on the bottom of the website, including a phone number. God help us all. A website old enough that people still leave their phone numbers lying around on it? On something slightly less than a whim, I turned on my phone and punched in the number. It rang 5 times, and then somebody picked up. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd expected it to be as defunct as the website. "Hello?" said a man's voice on the other end of the line. I didn't have a name or anything else. I blurted out, "Did you know Frederick Cotgrave?" Silence. "Is this a prank call?" asked the man, sounding less angry than tired. "No, I'm his granddaughter, his step-granddaughter. Please, I think it's important." A longer silence. Then, "I don't know what could be so important. He's been gone for a long, long time." "Please," I said, "it's about the Holler people. The white people, the ones in the hills." I got up and went outside the coffee shop so that Enid didn't think I'd cracked up completely. A sharply indrawn breath on the other end of the line was the only acknowledgement. "Please," I said again, "I need to know." What did I need to know? God, stupid question. I needed to know 1,000 things probably, and I didn't even know what questions to ask. "He's dead, isn't he?" "Really dead." "He's really dead." The voice at the other end was grave. "They buried as much of him as they could find." "What?" I remember Dad saying that Cotgrave had been outside too long and that the funeral had been closed casket, but this was something else again. "I know he died of exposure." The damn phone was already starting to heat up, and I switched it from one ear to the other. The man sighed. "Probably. No reason to think he didn't. But the scavengers were at him while he was out there. A lot went missing. I believe they identified him by his dental records and his wedding ring. I was at the funeral. We looked. I wish we hadn't." "Odd people at the funeral," Aunt Kate had said. "It's just, I got a message. I mean, it had Kilroy. Kilroy was here, you know?" The voice gave a choked laugh. "Mr. Chad, yes, I remember." And just like that, I was pretty certain that the man on the other end of the line had been no stranger to World War II and Freddie Cotgrave. "Can you tell me anything about the people in the hills?" I asked, desperately. The phone was starting to cook my ear, and I swapped it again. "I can tell you to stay away," he said. And then my phone beeped twice and went dead. And that was the end of that. There was one task left that I had been putting off. Now it seemed that I was out of time. I went back inside, pulled up a file on the computer, and wrote down all the important information I could think of. The vet Bongo went to, and the name it was under, and my Aunt Kate's contact information, and the password to my email. I didn't have a will. I didn't have enough stuff to really need a will. The bank would probably take my house back shortly, once I stopped paying the mortgage, and Aunt Kate had keys so she could get in and get anything she wanted before it all got cleared out. The truck was paid off, so I made a note where the title was in the house. I sat back and took a slug of coffee and stared at the list. My life in a nutshell, and mostly it was my dog. Should I say something to Kate and Dad? Something that would make sense of it all? What could I possibly say? I thought for another minute or two, and then I typed, "I'm going into the woods to try to find someone. I'm afraid they might be in danger and need help. If something goes wrong, here is all the information for everything. Give Aunt Kate and my dad my love, and make sure someone takes care of Bongo." I saved everything, put the file on the desktop, and named it, "Please read this. Give Aunt Kate and my dad my love." It felt like the coward's way out, but I didn't even know where to begin otherwise. I shut down the laptop and stared at my coffee. And then I felt a pang of guilt and started it back up so I could add a note at the bottom that I hadn't finished the project for the one author and to please refund her $300 down payment, because if I wound up dangling from a tree with wind chimes hanging off my ribs, I didn't want my last thoughts to be that I owed her, even if she was 3 months late. "You doing okay?" asked Enid. I looked up at her and thought that if we'd had more time, and if everything hadn't been so insane, we could probably have been friends. I wanted to say, "I'm about to do something stupid, and incidentally, the world is totally different than we think it is." "I'm tired," I said instead. "Just everything. Tired." "Any more things in the trees?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said, "not in the trees." Her gaze got a little too sharp at that, and I thought of all the things I'd have to explain to get around to the effigy in the window. Did she know about the Holler people? No. She wasn't from around here, was she? At one point, she'd mentioned being from New Hampshire. Did they have Holler people in New Hampshire? I looked down at my coffee cup instead. "Let me get you a refill," she said. "I'm about done," I said, putting my laptop away. "Then I'll get it for you for the road." I left the shop with a hot cup of coffee in my hand and hoped it wasn't the last one I'd ever drink. Just past the coffee shop was an empty gravel lot. The edges had grown up into the unruly hedgerow you get when nobody bothers to weed for a couple of years. The hickory tree wasn't even as tall as I was. It had been cut to the ground a couple times and was sending up suckers with unkillable enthusiasm. I crouched down and snapped off a couple of dead twigs at the base and stuffed them in my pocket. Then I looked around to see if anybody had seen me stealing bits of wood with coffee in one hand. Nobody had. I went to the truck, feeling invincible, and as far as I know, nobody saw me go. Chapter 16. Foxy was waiting for me at her house. She handed me another Tupperware container full of sandwiches. "You'll want these, I imagine. And have some food." "This is insane, isn't it?" I said. "Oh, you're completely out of your head," said Foxy agreeably, heating up meatloaf in my grandmother's ancient microwave. She pushed it toward me. Thomas came in. I wasn't sure how much he knew, but he looked at me and said, "It's a bad idea," so I figured he knew enough. "I know," I said, "but I have to." Saying it out loud made it sound even more fragile. Did I? Why? Because somebody had drawn Kilroy on a scrap of paper? Somebody sent me a note asking for help. Thomas nodded. He went into the back of the house, and I heard a door open and close. I was dragging the last forkful of meatloaf through the gravy when he returned. He was wearing a battered leather jacket and hiking boots. "I'm coming with you," he said. I stared at him, blinking stupidly. "What?" "Look, my mama would beat me senseless if I let you and Foxy go off without me." "Don't be stupid," said Foxy sharply. "You gotta stay here and take care of the place. We can't both go." "I'm half your age," said Thomas. "So you got more to live for." "You're both nuts," I said, rising out of my chair. You can't come with me. I'm going to get killed."
"Better to do it in company then," said Foxy. "I ain't scared, Thomas. You're staying here, and that's final." She folded her arms. "It's your name on the deed. And the power bill."
This was not a line of argument I expected her to take. We both stared at Foxy.
"So," said Thomas.
"So you ain't got a will. So if and you die, they're going to take the whole place and throw Skip out on his ear and shut off the power, so you gotta live, and maybe that'll teach you not to die intestate like a damn fool." Thomas's mouth opened and closed. He looked at me, but there was absolutely nothing I could say to this, and also I was still dealing with the fact that Foxy was coming with me. But Foxy,
"Don't argue. I got a will all made out. And notarized."
I looked at her. She was wearing ripped jeans over black fishnets and the sort of spiked boots that you'd wear to a punk show. Her lipstick was a particularly savage shade of pink. She was perhaps the most unlikely bodyguard I could imagine, but the alternative was going alone with my dog.
"Notarized?" I said, weakly. "Yeah, and I had to pay $5 to have that done, so I don't want to hear any more about it."
I finished my meatloaf in defeat. I tried one more time before we left, standing in the doorway. "Are you sure? I mean, this is way past being neighborly."
"Ain't paid you for the moose head or the microwave," said Foxy. "And if we all come back, I ain't going to."
I just looked at her. Astonishingly, a little bit of a flush started to creep up her sharp old face.
"Look," she growled, "you're doing a dumb thing for a good reason. And maybe I'm not that different from Thomas. If I let you go off in the woods and get et by holler people, or whatever it is they do, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror anymore." She rallied a bit. "And I gotta look in the mirror. Makeup this good doesn't happen blind."
"Thanks," I said.
She snorted. "Don't thank me too hard. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit curious about what's on the other side of those stones."
"Yeah, well," I held the door open for her. I was pretty scared. She went out past me, hefting her backpack strap over her shoulder.
"Oh, don't worry. You still ought to be."
There were still a few hours of light left as we set off into the woods. Bongo bounced around on the end of his leash in enormous good spirits. I hoped this was a good sign. If he had been terribly traumatized by visiting the place where someone had put a note in his collar, he didn't show any sign of it.
"Probably should start out in the morning," said Foxy, "but I ain't looking forward to another night waiting for monsters to come in the windows."
"You and me both." Leaves crunched underfoot as we walked. The house vanished behind us. "I don't know where we're going," I confessed. "I figured we'd start at the stones. I think sort of this way-ish. But Bongo led the way the first time.
Think he can find it again?"
We both looked at Bongo. He was peeing meditatively against a tree stump. "I don't think there's any way to ask him," I confessed. "He's, kind of an idiot." Foxy grinned.
"Well, I got there by shooting a deer, and deer are about the dumbest animals in creation, so maybe we'll get lucky."
In retrospect, if we'd been really lucky, we probably would have wandered around in circles for a bit and then gone home for more meatloaf. I still probably wouldn't sleep well at night, but I'd have managed. I could have convinced myself it was all an elaborate hoax, and some weird neighbor had dressed up in a deer outfit to scare the crap out of me. But we weren't lucky like that. Bongo picked up a smell that was probably a vole under the leaves and dragged me after it, huffing on the end of his leash. When he reached the invisible spot he was after, he scuffed at the ground for a minute. Then, disappointed, he straightened up. I watched his nostrils working. His ears were lifted, alert, and then he struck out south and east. He wasn't quite running, but moving with the concentration of a dog on a mission. "It doesn't mean anything," I muttered to myself, or to Foxy, or to both. "He does this for squirrels, too." It wasn't a squirrel. It was something else. He began to move faster and faster into a ground-eating lope, tail up like a flag. I glanced beside me. Foxy was keeping up despite the heels on her boots.
"Don't mind me," she panted. "There's a lot of holes. Hun, I've been living in these woods my whole life. You just watch your own feet. Yes, Foxy?"
We veered more south than I remembered. I was starting to wonder if maybe we were chasing a squirrel after all, when there was the dry stream bed. Despite the recent rains, the leaves were dry and crackling instead of slimy. Small blessings, I suppose. In what seemed like no time at all, we reached the wicker-like tunnel. It was still dry and dead-looking, and the afternoon shadows were starting to lengthen under it. I ducked down into it, while Bongo sniffed along the leaves.
"Phew," said Foxy. "Not the way I came last time. Or maybe it was, and stuff grew up around it."
We went forward. Pretty soon we were almost jogging along. There was a sense of urgency that I can't explain. Part of it was the desire to get to the stones before the sun went down. But there was something else, too, as if a door was closing and we had to reach it before it shut. No, not like that. As if a door was opening and we had to be out of the room before whatever was on the other side came through. Foxy hooked her hand under the strap of my backpack. I glanced back, surprised.
"I ain't slowing down," she said, although she was breathing hard, "but feeling weird."
"Your heart," I said, panicky.
"Are you—" "No, not my heart. Don't make me slap you upside the head. My heart's fine." She rolled her eyes. "I mean, it feels like you're going on ahead of me and it's getting harder to follow. I'm thinking something doesn't want me along."
She tightened her grip on my pack.
"Ain't gonna give it the satisfaction."
I nodded. Bongo was hauling on his leash now, whining at our slowness. The tunnel tilted upward. I had to hunch over, feeling Foxy's knuckles still hard against my shoulder blade. We had to hurry. The door was opening, and if we weren't quick, there was a single, hollow tock on the other side of the wicker, and my heart lurched. If it had stopped there, I could have convinced myself it was a woodpecker. Maybe. But it didn't stop there. The noise came again and again, louder, until it was directly beside me. If the wall had not been in the way, I could have reached out and touched it. Tock, 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 the sounds of stones in a hollow chest of bones. Bongo began to run. It was there. Tock, tock, tock. I could hear the stones rattling and the sound of its feet hitting the ground, and a strange scraping noise like scissors opening and closing. Is that what it sounds like when bones run? All that stood between us and the effigy were thin, dead branches and dry vines woven between them. I could see flashes of light and shadow through the gaps, and I thought inanely, I knew it could go out in the day. I knew it. It could have been there all this time, watching me. Bongo heaved forward against the leash, and I ran after him, trying to remember if there were gaps in the tunnel, if there was a place where the effigy could come through. Please no, God no. I remember very little of that flight up the hillside. I don't know how long it took. It must have been much lighter than I remember it being, because it was only late afternoon. But in my memory, it is a dark, closing tunnel. I could not see my feet. Occasionally, I would catch a flash of brightness from the metal rings on Bongo's collar. I ran blind, and Foxy ran behind me, and outside the tunnel, the effigy kept pace. Was it on the left, the right? I didn't want to look because if I looked, maybe I'd see it. And if I saw it, I was afraid I'd fall down and curl into a ball until it ate me. Tock, tock, tock. Oh God, was there more than one? It seemed to come from both sides. Oh God, let that be echoes. Let it not be two of them. I can't handle two of them. I can't even handle one of them. Oh God. Something struck the wicker tunnel. The precarious root and vine frame bowed sideways, and fragments of bark and dried leaf rained down on us. The walls shook wildly as whatever it was, "Shut up, you know what it is," slammed against the side, and the tock, tock, tock was no longer a woodpecker knock, but a staccato like gunfire. Foxy never faltered. I must have paused because she shouted in my ear, "Keep moving!" and I lunged forward while Bongo heaved upward at the end of the leash. Foxy was in better shape than I was, for all that she was close to twice my age. When my backpack began to slide down, she wedged it back up on my shoulder, and pretty soon she was pushing me forward, and Bongo was pulling, and the effigy rattled the hagstones in its ribs, and I dragged air into my chest that stabbed like knives. And not suddenly at all, not anywhere close to suddenly, an eternity later, we fell out of the wicker tunnel and into the field of twisted stones. Chapter 17. I couldn't have leapt to my feet if my life depended on it. Foxy was crouched over me, and Bongo was trying to stand over me protectively and also to hide underneath me in terror. When a minute or two had passed, and my heart was slowing, and I still wasn't dead, I whispered, "Is it gone?" "Think so," said Foxy. "If there was ever anything there, which I ain't entirely sure of." I looked up at her, silently. She snorted and looked back down the tunnel. "Fine, okay," she said. "Yeah, it's gone." I breathed for a few minutes. The sky was gray. Bare trees hung on the hills like curtains in a dark room. Bongo hunched down and fit himself under my knees as best he could. I kept thinking it was a woodpecker before. I said, finally, "Can see why." I didn't say, "Do you think there were two of them?" because I didn't think I could handle it if she said yes. "Do you think it was trying to keep us from getting here?" I asked instead. "Something was," said Foxy. She held out her left hand. There was a raw, red stripe across her fingers and palm, as if something had taken the top layer of skin off. Blood beaded at the edges. "Foxy, it's fine," she said. "I mean, it hurts like the devil, but it's not deep. It was where I had your backpack. Toward the end there, it felt like a handful of nettles." I grabbed my backpack strap, as if expecting it to be made of sandpaper, but it just felt like normal nylon. "Expect it was meant for me, not you," said Foxy matter-of-factly. "I felt it before, too. I'm not supposed to come along." "Why would it want that?" "Who knows what the holler people want?" She grinned sourly. "Maybe they figure my ratty old bones won't look good on their mantelpiece." "And mine will?" "Hey, maybe you got cute bones." I started laughing, half high on adrenaline, and stood up. Bongo, reassured that everything was all right again, licked the back of my hand. I dug my fingers in behind his ears as I looked around the hillside. The sky was the same shade of gray as before. If sunset was coming on, there was no sign of it. It was gray, gray, gray. A wicked, boorish dome. Under the sky, the hills, same as before, and the trees that hung like curtains on the hillsides were still bare. I wondered if they ever leafed out at all. Were there even seasons in this place? "Shit," said Foxy, looking around, and then more quietly. "Shit." "Eloquent," I said. "Is it like you remember?" "Yeah, pretty much. Only—" She waved her hand. "More." I nodded. It had been only, 10 days? 11? But my memory had whittled down some of the edges of the place. It wasn't that I didn't remember it. It was just that the reality was indeed more. The tree, slithering out from under the stones, was more like a snake. The leering carvings were stranger and sharper, and the animals twisted themselves more grotesquely in pain or in ecstasy, as if my mind hadn't quite been able to hold everything. No, wait. The girl in the green book had described the trees like snakes. Maybe that had gotten into my head somehow, too. "Which way?" said Foxy. "I have no idea." I hefted my backpack. "I still don't even know if Bongo was here when he got the note. We might be in completely the wrong place." "Never stopped me before," said Foxy. "The white stone's this way," I said. The white stone, Yes, the white stone, the tall one, the one that's carved with something that you need to see again. My voice sounded totally normal, and the fact that I suddenly had a weird, itchy desire to see the white stone again didn't seem to impact it. I could touch it. I could figure out the carvings this time. Would it be warm or cold, smooth or rough? In my dream, it had been cold, and I tried to warm it. Good a place to start as any. Of course, she couldn't know that I wanted to see it. I shouldn't tell her. It would make me sound weird or controlled by holler people when the fact was that, oh, it doesn't matter. Stop worrying and start walking. Past the carvings, the scowling ones, and the ones like animals, and the ones that lay down like dead things. And I twisted myself around like, shut up, just shut up, get to the white stone. Ugly little bastards, muttered Foxy, eyeing the scowling stones. Don't try to imitate them, I said. They don't like that. Or they like it a lot, I don't know which. Foxy gave me a sharp look. You okay? Yeah, I'm sorry, it's this place. I rubbed my forehead. Brain fog. But the stones, yeah. I tried to make a face like one the last time, and I shouldn't have. I was almost able to. I thought I was going to dislocate my jaw. Foxy raised her eyebrows. Huh? Yeah, I sort of forgot about that. I tried not to make eye contact with the grinning faces in the rocks. It seemed so crazy. And it's all crazy. And I was afraid I was going crazy, so I figured it was just my mind playing tricks. And maybe I had a muscle spasm or something. But now, I think it was probably real. Probably. Foxy shook her head. These things. If Skip was here, he could tell us what kind of carving it is. He went to some fancy art school out west, and every now and again he'll come out with, that's postmodern pre-Raphaelitism, or something like that. I don't know if they covered things like this in art history class. The stones that lay down like the dead ones were curled in the grass in front of us. I guess we could take a photo for him. Foxy snorted. I didn't bring a camera. Kinda doubt things would come out real well, even if I had. I remembered the way that my one photo had come out overexposed, looking like a bad Photoshop of somebody's fingerprint. Probably. Bongo gave the dead ones a wide berth. He didn't seem frightened of them, but he definitely didn't want to get too near them, as if they were a hole in the ground he was afraid to fall into. Maybe they're a hole in the world, and if you look too long, you'll fall through. The lines seemed to swim in front of me as if they were breathing. I felt dizzy and hot. It's just like being seasick. The horizon's wrong. Go find the white stone. Use it as an anchor and everything will settle down again. The white stone's past these, I said, careful to keep my eagerness out of my voice. My hands appeared to be shaking. That was very odd. It wouldn't do to let Foxy see that. She'd get the wrong idea. I shoved them in my jacket pockets as well as I could while holding Bongo's leash. Something jabbed me in the knuckles. My head seemed to clear abruptly. Wait, what? Foxy? Huh? This is odd. I want to see that white stone again. She looked over at me, faintly puzzled. We're going there, ain't we? No, I mean, I suddenly really wanted to. And I didn't want to tell you about it. And I think that's weird and suspicious. Her gaze sharpened. Now that's interesting. Good on you for fighting it. I don't think I was fighting it, I admitted. I dug around in my jacket pocket for what had jabbed me and pulled out a twig. I poked myself with this. Is that hickory? Yeah, from outside the coffee shop. Foxy nodded. Hickory'll help. I'm wearing like a pound of it myself. You still got that rosary? In my backpack. Well, put it on then. You think evil's gonna sit around and wait while you get dressed? Chastened, I pulled out the string of hickory beads and dropped it over my head. The air seemed to lighten. The twisted carvings still moved when I looked at them, but they moved less, more like a bad moire pattern than like breathing.
I thought of the white stone carefully, as if I were probing a sore spot with my tongue. Big white rock. Some weird stuff going on with that rock. How we feeling about that rock? I had no particular opinion about the rock, other than that it was another creepy thing on the pile of increasingly creepy things. I was pretty sure that it was another rock, like the one in the Green Book, and thus there was a slim chance it might try to get me pregnant, and that I was a bit miffed at it for apparently trying to get into my head. I reported this to Foxy. "Complicated old world, isn't it?" she said. She had picked up a stick somewhere and was poking the dead, twisted one with it. "Are you sure you should be doing that? Look, if it's going to come to life and take a chunk out of me, I'd rather it did now than when my back was turned." There was a certain logic to this position. The dead, twisted one did not take a chunk out of her, despite several solid pokes with the stick. I think Foxy might have been slightly disappointed. On the far side of the dead ones was a little space, and then more carvings. I remembered walking through them for a long way, but I wasn't sure how long it had been. I hadn't exactly been in my right mind, had I? I'd been singing "Oh, Susanna," and it had gotten a bit strange after that. "This is farther than I got," said Foxy. "I guess we just keep walking then." So we walked through more carvings, some of them very large indeed, and anchored down in the ground somehow. I didn't remember those. Had it been some enchantment, some wicked vur that the hickory was keeping away? And then I saw the white stone. It gleamed in the dim light like a tooth. There was the grassy bowl around it, and the ferns around the base, and the carving of something. We stopped at the top of the bowl. The stones around the rim leaned inward toward the stone, and I wondered vaguely if it was acting on their brains the way it had acted on mine. "Settle down. They're rocks. They don't have brains. Although up here in this place, who the hell knows? Maybe they do. In the Green Book, isn't there a bit where the narrator wonders if her family all got turned to stones? Maybe these are all the people who got stuck up here, the moonshiners and the frat boys and whatnot." I squeezed the hickory twig tightly between my fingers, but the thoughts didn't go away. Apparently, that was just me being paranoid, not any kind of magic. "Huh," said Foxy, looking at the stone. "Do you feel like you want to go touch it?" I asked, hesitantly. I wanted to, the first time I saw it. "I do," she said slowly, "but I ain't going to. I can feel the wanting to, though. It's like a pretty boy you know is more trouble than he's worth." She folded her arms and glared at the stone, and I pitied any pretty boy who had caused her trouble in the past. "This is the second time I'm seeing it," I said. "I think I'm supposed to be pregnant now." "We'll get you a test when we get back home, eh?" It'd have to get past the IUD first. Weird and creepy as the white stone was, I had a hard time imagining it was a match for that. What about you? "Hun, if I get knocked up, it won't be magic. It'll be a goddamn miracle." She craned her neck, looking around the stone. "What's on the other side?" I shook my head. This is as far as I got. I saw the stone and things got a little weird. I glanced down at Bongo. He was watching the stone intently, the way he watched cars out the window sometimes. Was it going to go past the house, or was it the UPS guy and thus his mortal enemy? It was so quiet here. There was no wind to ripple the grass of the bald or move clouds in the heavy gray sky. I couldn't hear any insects calling or frogs or birds. No woodpeckers. "Let's go around," Foxy said finally. We skirted the rim of the grass bowl. Bongo continued to watch the stone, his whole body taut, his ears straining forward. On the far side, we looked back at the white stone, and Foxy gave a single bray of laughter. Bongo yanked on the leash, startled, and then gave her a reproachful glance. "Sorry, buddy," she said to him. "Well, that's a hell of a thing, isn't it?" I stared at Ambrose's white stone and almost wanted to laugh myself. From this side, it was obvious.
It was two beings, and they were, not to put too fine a point upon it, screwing like rabbits. Well, it wasn't like it was a surprise. Ambrose's white stone was clearly kin to this one. I just hadn't been expecting it to be quite so vivid. They were carved in much the same style as the rest of the stones, deeply scored lines that moved too much when you saw them from the corner of your eye. The top one had great curving horns like a ram, and he was pulling back the head of his partner by her own horns, which were long and twisting like an antelope's. Her throat seemed very thick, like a beast's neck, and her face protruded into a muzzle like a beast, but her body was mostly human, if oddly proportioned. Speaking of proportions, well, he had nothing to worry about in that department. "That one I'd put in the front yard," said Foxy cheerfully, "just to see the mailman's face." "Huh," I said weakly. The longer I looked, the less funny it got, which is odd because, frankly, sex is hilarious. But the carvings were so detailed, and the moire pattern movement made the bodies undulate and seem to thrust together, and I was starting to get dizzy looking at it, and I remembered the dream where I pressed myself against the white stone. Was the female beast enjoying it? Her mouth was open in what could have been passion or agony. My head ached. I could feel a pulse beating in my right eye and in my temples and between my legs. Dear God, was I getting turned on by the carving? "I gotta sit down," I said. "Not right here," suggested Foxy, taking my arm. She steered me away from the stone. Once I was no longer looking at it, it got easier. My pulse stopped beating in my ears or anywhere else. "What the hell is that thing?" I asked after a few minutes of sitting on the grass with my back to the carving. I know it's stupid, but I felt like, and then I blushed, which was nuts. The entire situation was completely batshit loony. And here I was blushing because among the batshit loony things was a statue with a big, honking dick on it. "It's okay, hun. If I was a few years younger, well." She shook her head. "I'm old enough to know better, but it's still got a wallop, doesn't it?" A wallop, yes. That was as good a description as any. Bongo sat down and scratched behind his ear. Apparently it didn't work on dogs or on males, or at least on males whose testicles were a distant, vet-related memory. "I guess old Ambrose was on to something after all," I said. "If he's expecting us to get preggers from looking at it, he's still going to be pretty disappointed. Had those bits out years ago. Not that they were doing me a hell of a lot of good anyway, but it'd be a bitch to get cancer in a bit I ain't using." "I hear you," I said absently, petting Bongo. "I don't know. Do you think the girl, whoever she was, actually got pregnant looking at a statue?" "Oh, who the hell knows? For all I know, it's just got her thinking about it, and she went and found some nice young fella to get her in the family way. From the way your granddaddy talked about Ambrose, he'd have found that a lot more shocking than looking at a statue." Foxy snorted. "Certain sort of man would probably prefer it if sex was all looking at statues and no actual poking." "It is very likely that she did," said a voice behind us, "and bore a child of it, or more than one." Foxy and I both jerked upright. Bongo, valiant guard dog that he was, looked up and wagged his tail. There was a woman standing there. She was very tall and very pale. Even her eyes were pale. Her irises were flecked with red, and her pupils were the faded gray color of the sky. "I have borne 7, she said. 5 drew no breaths. Of the other 2, but we will speak of that later." Where had she come from? Why hadn't we heard her? "Who are you?" said Foxy, her chin jutting out. "My name is Anna," said the woman. She pronounced it with a long first syllable, Anna. "I am one of the people of this place." I saw motion out of the corner of my eye. It was the same twisting moire pattern as the stones, but when I turned my head, there was a man standing there. He was as tall as she was, and I suppose he was handsome, but there was something odd about his skin. He did not speak, but took his place beside the woman. He was even paler than she was. Both of them had hair that was not so much white as completely colorless, like mist. Anna folded her hands together. "You will come with me now," she said. It was not a request, but a statement of fact. Foxy tried to push back, nevertheless. "What if we don't?" The pale woman shook her head, and then I heard it, the click of bones, the hollow rattle of stones knocking together. Talk, talk, talk. Bongo's wagging stopped, and a whine started up in his throat. Shapes began to appear out of the gloom behind her, coming from behind the stones or from inside the earth itself. The air twisted and untwisted until my eyes watered, but I could still see them all too well. Effigies, dozens of them. Not on the other side of a window, not with walls between us, right here, right now. Talk, talk, talk. I sucked in my breath and honestly did not know if I would ever draw another one. "You have no choice," the woman said, as monsters of stone and bone surrounded her. "You have trespassed into deep places, and the only way out is deeper still." Chapter 18. I think that Bongo is the only reason I didn't have a nervous breakdown on the spot. There are stories of people enduring horrors, escaping war zones, walking for hundreds of miles barefoot, that sort of thing, because they are being strong for their children. I am not saying it's the same thing at all. Bongo, as I've said before, is not my child, he's my dog. Nevertheless, at that moment, he needed me. He was making that horrible fear growl. His back was humped up, and his tail was between his legs. I dropped down next to him and put my arms around him to keep him from lunging at an effigy and getting probably killed. He was peeing in terror, which meant he peed on my knee, but I was feeling a little loose-bladdered myself. Foxy stood over me and gripped my shoulder. I could hear her breathing, harsh and quick behind me. "We'll leave," I said. "I'm sorry we bothered you. We'll go away and not come back." "You will come with me now," repeated Anna, ignoring me. "My dog can't," I said. I didn't look at the effigies. If I didn't look at the monsters, they couldn't be real. But there were so many, and they were moving, and I kept seeing bits of them, even as I tried not to look. Hooves and horns and rocks and branches like antlers and old rags stretched over frames that weren't remotely human. Don't look, don't look. If you don't look, they can't see you." "Then you will be killed," said the man, speaking for the first time. His voice was thinner than I expected and had a quaver in it like a very old man's. "I'm not refusing," I said. Foxy's fingers tightened on my shoulder. "This is not me refusing. We'll go with you, but my dog's scared. I'll carry him." I was speaking very calmly and rationally. I remember that. If I could just keep everyone talking, they wouldn't let the things I wasn't looking at get my dog. I said, "I'll carry him," as if it were that easy. Bongo weighs 60-odd pounds. I'm not strong enough to carry something that size very far, but I didn't know what else to say. Anna stepped forward until she was only a few feet from Bongo and me. I looked up at her and she was impossibly tall. I know I was kneeling on the ground, but before I'd thought she was 6'4", maybe a bit more. Now she looked 7 feet tall, 8, 10, taller than any human I'd ever seen. She did something with her left hand. The air around her fingers made another moire distortion pattern that drifted toward Bongo. No! I put out a hand to ward it off. It felt like the barest breath of air on my skin as it passed. My hand went through it. The tiny hairs on the back of my fingers stood on end, but that was all. "He will take no harm of it," said Anna. "It is a charm to calm beasts, that is all." She made the gesture again. This time it was faster. The distorted air shimmered around Bongo's face like a heat haze on the road. I felt his trembling ease against my chest. The growl died away into nothing. He gave a short, puzzled whine, as if he could not quite remember why he had been angry, and then he turned his head and licked my face. She had just done, what, magic? Was that magic? Of course it was fucking magic. What are you, stupid? What did you think was happening? How did you think the effigy was walking around, if not magic? How are all of them walking around, if not magic? Well, yes, I did not much like the prospect of someone magicking my dog, but if it meant that nobody got killed and Bongo wasn't pissing himself in terror, that was what mattered, right? Hell, if I'd had sedatives, I'd have jammed them down his throat and probably taken one myself. I stood up. My own legs were shaking. Foxy's hand on my shoulder squeezed harder. "We will go now," said Anna. "Foxy, looks like we don't have much choice," she said. "Come on, hon." Anna swept her arm in a slow, dramatic gesture, pointing farther down the hill. She was wearing gray cloth wrapped around her, some kind of robe or sari or toga, something with a lot of folds. The cloth hung down from her arm when she gestured, making her look like some kind of classical statue. I focused very hard on her arm and not on the milling shapes just behind it. Sooner or later I was going to have to look at them, but if I did, I was going to become as frozen as poor Bongo had been. I had to not look. Everybody yells at Orpheus and Lot's wife. Put yourself in their shoes for 5 minutes, and you'd yell a lot less, I promise you. I gathered up Bongo's leash. He walked next to me, tail and ears up, a dog on a walk that was a bit boring, but which held the hope of being interesting. I could hear the effigies walking on the grass. Their feet clicked when they touched stone. My skin was going to crawl off my body soon. I locked my eyes on Anna. She began to walk in the direction she had pointed, down slope, into the gloomy twilight. I could see the bare trees in serrated ranks around us. I was starting to think that the trees would never leaf out, that their nature was just to be empty branches and twisting trunks. Perhaps they were parasitic. There's a fair number of parasitic plants. Beach drops, dodder, Indian paintbrush. My aunt would have a field day. Was I thinking about plants so that I wouldn't think about monsters? You bet your ass I was. I don't know how long we walked. The slope got steeper. I divided my time between staring at my feet and staring at Anna's back. Her colorless hair seemed very bright in the darkness, like fog on a dark night. I didn't dare look around, but I knew Foxy was behind me. I could hear her breathing. "I'm sorry I got you into this, Foxy," I said. "Shit, hon, I should have known better than to let either of us get into this." Stones loomed out of the dimness, 3 of them arranged like a doorway. It looked like a scaled-down Stonehenge. I did not want to go through those stones. Stupid thing to say, obviously. I didn't want to be anywhere near here. I didn't want to be following the holler people with their horrific pets crowding around behind me. But I really didn't want to go through the doorway. It exuded a kind of, not menace exactly, remoteness, like I was about to pass through an airlock into an alien planet. Maybe I could break away and run now, if I tried, and probably the things would kill me. But if I went through those stones, I would be somewhere else and there was no getting back under my own power. Anna passed over the stone threshold. Nothing obvious happened. She didn't vanish or waver or turn strange colors. I turned my head and looked behind me. There were at least a dozen effigies close behind us. They formed a loose semicircle behind Foxy, moving restlessly back and forth. The dim light gleamed on pale bone and sparked on bits of rusted wire. The one nearest me was hunched up like a vulture, shorter than I was. Its head was a broad fan shape made of twigs tied to— was that a broken shovel blade? It turned its head. The twigs were bent and crooked, and the hollow places they framed gazed back at me like eyes. There were more than 2. There may have been more than 10. The rest of its body was draped in roadkill rags. I couldn't make out details, and I was glad I couldn't. Suddenly the deer effigy seemed almost tame by comparison. It was too dark now to see the rest clearly. That was fine. I had an impression of ragged bodies, limbs made of bone, and branches wrapped in wire and cord. Some of them vaguely human or animal-shaped, some of them not remotely human at all. The twisted ones, the ones the rocks are supposed to resemble, or things made to resemble the rocks. I could hear them moving. Bone clicked, and branches creaked, and things sighed and sloughed and tapped. Something out there sounded incongruously like denim rubbing together between someone's thighs as they walked. Schloof, shoof, shoof. If I tried to run, they would be on me at once. Foxy? I see him too, hun. I nodded. Sticks and stones, I thought. Sticks and stones may break my bones. I didn't bother with the second line. Who gave a damn about words now? With one hand on Bongo's collar and one wrapped around the hickory beads, I stepped through the doorway into the Voorish dome. Nothing dramatic happened when I stepped over the threshold. There wasn't a flash of light or a crack of thunder. It was just a little easier to see suddenly, as if it was not quite so dim. When I looked down, there was a path at my feet. The grass had been worn away to packed earth, yellow-orange clay with tiny pebbles embedded in it. That part was still like the landscape around the house anyway. The bare trees parted around the path. Unlike the wickered tunnel, they grew tall and straight, but it was still a long and winding way down. I took a quick glance behind me. Foxy was there, so was the tall, pale man, so were the effigies. The archway stood at the top of the path, as remote and unreachable as a star. Bongo's tail was up, wagging vaguely as he trotted after Anna. I envied him. White stones gleamed like fireflies in the dark, dotting the edge of the path. They were carved in patterns that at first seemed unfamiliar. Then I realized that they were the same as the twisted ones. The designs folded and doubled back on themselves, but they weren't doing the painful, eye-burning jitter. I could look at them out of the corner of my eye, and they didn't look as if they were crawling away. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Either something was happening with my eyes, or maybe that moire pattern is what happens when an enchantment meets the real world, like heat haze on the road. Now you're not in the real world, so it isn't distorting the air around it anymore. Thanks, self. That was real helpful. A+ coping mechanism. If the white stones were enchanted, then there had been one sitting at the edge of my grandmother's garden for quite a while. Although for all I knew, that particular stone was a signpost of sorts, a warning to the other Holler people that my grandmother's presence was foul. I wondered how Cotgrave had figured that out in the first place. Ambrose, maybe? Or maybe he just stopped seeing the things after he met her? He hadn't written it down. I wished I knew. Maybe I'd have been able to repel the damn things now. Anna turned to follow a bend in the path. I saw her profile. It was impassive, but not serene. a set face with secrets behind it. What had the Green Book said about the Lady Cassop? That she was the tallest and whitest of them all? Which meant, what exactly? That the author was weirdly racist? That Cassop was closely related to the Holler people? Close enough to summon snakes and do magic with wax dolls, not close enough to get out of being burned alive? I could believe that the woman in front of me could summon snakes. Frankly, snakes would have been an improvement. Snakes are generally more scared of humans than humans are of them. It would be nice to be around something that was more scared of me than I was of it. The effigies sure weren't. Anna turned again, following a set of switchbacks down the hillside. Something was moving among the trees. I could catch glimpses of things shifting. Rags, perhaps? Grasses? Not leaves, not in this leafless forest. A low, throbbing sound filled the air, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Easy," said Foxy behind. "Easy, hun. That one's a mourning dove." "Oh, God," I said faintly. I felt embarrassed, which was probably stupid because being terrified out of my wits was absolutely the most logical thing I could be at the moment. Still, who knew they had mourning doves in, what, fairyland? Hell? I followed Anna. I couldn't shake a sense that I knew her from somewhere, but I couldn't remember from where. Well, I don't really have context, do I? I mean, if you're used to seeing someone while surrounded by monsters, you don't recognize them when they're just getting a scone at the coffee shop, do you? I was pretty sure I did not know her from the coffee shop. The switchbacks continued down the hill. I began to see buildings through the bare trees below us. They were made of pale stone or clay, squared off like something you'd see at Mesa Verde or in the desert around Mesopotamia. There were strange growths off the side of the buildings that at first looked like more trees. We were directly above one when I finally realized that it wasn't a tree but some kind of odd, lumpy construction of mud and branches. It looked wildly out of place against the square stone buildings. "Some kind of nests, looks like," whispered Foxy. Once she said the word nest, it snapped into focus. They looked like swallows' nests on the side of a building, only grown to enormous size. I wondered what would hatch inside that kind of nest, and then decided immediately that I did not want to know. I would be infinitely happier not knowing. There was absolutely no good that could come of knowing a thing like that. People like Ambrose talk about forbidden knowledge. Nobody talks about knowledge that is just a dreadfully bad idea all around. The white man moved up to walk beside Anna. He passed close enough that I could see that his skin had thousands of fine lines in it. They didn't look like wrinkles, but like cracks, the way some porcelain glazes crackle and break. It occurred to me suddenly that he might be an effigy himself, a very old skin over, what, tree branches and wire? Bones? A human skeleton full of hagstones? Bongo twitched as my fingers jerked on his leash. He glanced up at me as if wondering what my problem was. "Sorry," I whispered to my dog. We reached the final switchback. The base of the path led to a square, lit with that gray indirect light. From above, with no trees to block my view, I could look down into the heart of a cold city. It looked empty. The doors were black rectangles. There were no lights. There were only a few things scuttling between the buildings, and from the way they moved, I knew they were not even so human as Anna was. Maybe the other people are asleep, or they don't want to get close to us. Hell, for all I know, it's like the War of the Worlds and they're afraid of catching some disease from us. I wondered briefly if I should worry about catching some terrible disease from Anna, then glumly decided that I was probably not going to live long enough to worry about whether I was up on my current vaccines. Anna herself strode forward, never slowing. Her entourage of clicking, sighing effigies bunched up around us until I knew that they were as close to me as Foxy was. I could have reached out and touched one if I were so inclined. I would rather have gnawed my hand off at the wrist. "Look," I ordered myself as we entered that quiet square. "Look." The horror movie gets less scary once the monster comes out of the shadows. Just look at them. See what you're up against. I turned my head and saw the ones that flanked me. The fan-headed one I knew already. It hopped like a vulture when it walked. Some of the others, though, I forced myself to study them as if they were some of my Aunt Kate's samples, something safely under a microscope slide. Rag, bone, wire, stone. Other things, too, natural and unnatural. One had bullet casings tied in among its hagstones. One had the deep rib cage and narrow hips of a greyhound, the ribs stuffed with dead birds and old mouse nests. One was scaled in what looked like black leather until I realized that it was made of bits of blown-out tires. Sticks and stones may break my bones. Sticks and stones may break my bones. It ran through my head with the same maddening jump rope rhythm as the litany of the twisted ones, until the words had no meaning and it was just a rhyme pounding in my blood. There was an effigy that had dozens of thin mud pipes along its back. It took me a moment to realize that they were the nests of mud dauber wasps, the little clay chimneys that get built every summer, all tied together like organ pipes. Two paced beside me on my right, humped and headless, as if someone had built a body and then decided they'd gone far enough. Empty sleeves of some material, cloth or hide, it was impossible to tell, hung down where the necks should be. Perhaps I stared for too long, because one of those dangling sleeves moved as if there was something inside, something turning to look back at me. I jerked my eyes away and fixed them on Bongo's back. "Where do you think they're taking us?" I whispered to Foxy. "Shit, hun, does it matter?" "You will be taken to a holding place," said Anna, not looking back at us, "until your fate has been determined." "But where are we now?" I asked, looking over the effigies at the strange, empty city. I still had not seen another human or even one as human-shaped as the Holler people. "Is this more of the hill with the rocks?" "No. The place of stones is a threshold place," said Anna. "One can reach your world and this one from there. Thresholds are powerful, but it is not safe." "Safe?" I sank my teeth into my lower lip. Anna shrugged. "The white stone. The stone attracts attention. The Voorish dome over this place keeps it unnoticed. There are things that one might speak with, perhaps even invoke, but one does not wish to live beside them day after day." The irony of this statement, coming from a woman standing flanked by monstrous effigies built of bone and mud and wire, was so great that I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep myself from yelling at her or shaking her or doing any one of a number of things that would undoubtedly get me horribly slaughtered in short order. "Your critters there based on them stones?" asked Foxy, speaking up for the first time. The man with the cracked skin turned his head and looked at her. His pupils dilated wrong. I'd have thought he was on drugs except for the bit where I was in a cold city on the far side of impossible, and if anybody was on drugs, I would probably ask them if they'd share. "They are modeled on many things," he said, "but those are shapes of power." Most of me was terrified. Almost all of me, in fact. But underneath a tiny little voice was saying, "Isn't that fascinating? You're under the Voorish dome. You're somewhere that hardly anyone else has been. Even Cotgrave never got this far into the hills. Isn't that interesting?" I didn't know whether to embrace that voice or try to smother it. It was like standing on a cliff and hearing the little voice that tells you to jump. For all I know, once you jump off, that voice says, "Isn't this fascinating?" all the way down. "Listen to the wind rushing by your ears. Isn't that interesting? Look at how sharp the rocks are below you. Aren't you intrigued?" Foxy put her hand on my shoulder again. We all kept walking. I truly don't remember very much more about the walk through the city. I think it must have taken at least another 10 or 15 minutes, but it's mostly a blur. I stared at Bongo's ears. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing dark openings into buildings. I wondered if there were other Holler people inside, watching us from the darkness. Once I looked up, because we stepped into a shadow, and I saw the branches of one of the nests stretching over the street, connecting the two houses. Something came squirming out of a gap in the branches, something with long, flat limbs, or half-furled wings, dragging itself claw over claw up the structure. It looked soft, like clay, and the branches left deep, bloodless gouges in its flesh. I must have made a noise because Foxy stepped up beside me and grabbed my arm. "It's all right," she said. "No, it isn't." "Fine, it ain't, but I'm an old lady and you're supposed to be keeping my spirits up." I croaked a laugh. Anna looked back over her shoulder, which surprised me. She hadn't looked at me when she'd answered my questions before. The laughter didn't sit well in that place, and I was sorry I'd done it immediately, but at least it got me out from under the shadow of the nest. Nothing else made an imprint on my memory. Just the dark doorways and the tapping of the effigies and the bits of motion. Finally, we got where we were going. The street had curved around to reach what looked like a slanted stone wall in the hillside. Another dark opening yawned from it, but this one had double doors in it, standing open. Anna walked through them without a trace of fear, and Bongo followed her, and I realized that if I didn't hurry, an effigy was going to go next, and I would be left following one's back into the dark. My stomach lurched, and I rushed through the doors. Despite the width of the doors, the corridor narrowed until I could have touched both sides with my outstretched arms. It was dim inside, but not completely dark. The lighting came from what looked like oil lamps in recessed niches. I wondered vaguely what kind of oil they were burning. Did they have kerosene in hell? Fairy whales? How did it work? If you're thinking that I was focusing on something inconsequential in order to not think about what was happening, you are absolutely correct. "Someone must get the oil and refill the lamps," whispered the little voice in the abyss. The corridor sloped downward underfoot. There were no stairs. It just went on and on and on. Sometimes we would pass another corridor that joined with ours, or a doorway gaping like an open mouth. I lost count of how many questionable oil lamps we passed, how many times my shadow swelled on the wall opposite the niches. And it was a long, long, long way. The only mercy was that there were no echoes. I expected echoes in a corridor like that, but my footsteps fell muffled, as if there was a softness to the stone. I heard the faint tap of Bongo's nails and Foxy's heels clicking behind me, and that was all. Compared to what I could have heard echoing, the silence of the stone was very welcome. When Anna suddenly turned right and went into one of the other corridors, I almost stumbled. If Bongo hadn't been leading the way, I might have kept going, half hypnotized, until I ended up God knows where, under the earth. But Bongo tugged on the leash, and I jerked my head up, startled, and Foxy ran into my back. "Sorry," she muttered. I think she was probably in the same state I was. The corridor did not slope here, but it did curve from side to side like a snake. I no longer had any idea what direction we were facing, whether we'd come all the way around in a circle and passed underneath the sloping corridor, or if we were still going mostly in a straight line. What I did know was that the unrelieved stone of the walls began to change. First, it was only a few small hatch marks around the edges of the niches. Then the hatch marks began to expand, overlapping and twisting until they became long carved lines that connected the niches together. They weren't straight lines. They would double back on themselves, break apart, then rejoin. We came to a doorway where the carved lines wrapped around the threshold, not quite touching it. Unlike the other openings, there was a door in this one. Anna opened it and gestured for Foxy and Bongo and me to go inside. The room was not large, smaller than Cotgrave's bedroom. It reminded me of a sauna, not because it was hot, but because there were benches along both sides. They appeared to be carved out of the same stone as the walls. A niche stood at the far end with another of the oil lamps in it. I looked at Foxy. Foxy shrugged. I clicked my tongue at Bongo and walked forward. "We will return," said Anna, standing in the doorway. Her voice was even more remote than it had been. It might have been a recording for all the warmth in it. "We must discuss your fate. You will wait here." Foxy looked at our cell, then back at Anna. "Doesn't look like we've got a choice, do we?" Anna inclined her head. Under her elbow, I saw one of the humped, headless effigies moving back and forth. Foxy stepped inside. Anna nodded and closed the door. Chapter 19. We looked at the door. We looked at each other. We looked at the door again. Bongo sat down on the floor. "What am I going to do if he has to pee?" I muttered. "There's a grate," said Foxy. There was indeed a grate on the floor beneath the niche. It had metal bars. Foxy and I stared at it. "Think you could fit through?" she asked. I eyed it dubiously. "Not unless they leave us here long enough to lose some weight. And I don't know if dropping into the sewer would be an improvement. Do you think they even have sewers here? I guess even holler people got a shit. Those bone and wire things walking around probably don't. I don't know. What happens when they eat someone?" I grimaced. From her expression, Foxy wasn't too keen on the answer to that question herself. We abandoned the grate and sat down, backs against the wall. Bongo laid down on the floor between us. "Do you think it's the same stuff as that white stone?" I asked, poking the wall. Foxy gave me a look. "You got a what's-it on you?" "A what's-it?" "An X-ray spectrometer?" Even Bongo looked up at that. "I don't know what that is," I admitted. "Do I have one on me?" "Seems unlikely. That's the thing we used over at the cement plant when I worked there, to figure out if a batch went bad. You give me one of those, I'll tell you anything you want to know about these rocks." "Well, if I trip over one, I'll let you know. Maybe we could ask Anna if we could borrow one?" Foxy snorted. We sat in the room in silence for a minute. Finally, I said, "I'm scared shitless." "Yeah," said Foxy. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the wall. "Me too." "I sort of expected to die," I said. This was an awkward thing to express, as if I was picking my way through the words like I'd picked my way through the hill with the twisted stones. Or, hell, I don't know what else I expected. But not for there to be a place on the other side of everything with people and... I shook my head. There's too much more of it. Like, if you went out after... I don't know, after the Loch Ness Monster or something, and then it turned out that it was a secret government lab breeding plesiosaurs to blow up submarines. Foxy opened her eyes and tilted her head sideways, like Bongo did when I did something particularly baffling. "You'll have to explain that one a little better." I waved my hands helplessly. "It's too big. There's too much there. I mean, if I say there's weird stuff in the hills, everybody nods and says, 'Yep, doesn't surprise me.' But then I say, and they've got a whole city back there made out of white rocks and birds' nests and walking deer skulls and things made out of old shovels tied together. And then it sounds crazy." I groaned. "Do you think this is what happens to people who get abducted by aliens?" She raised an eyebrow. "Most of those people are nuts, hon." "I know, but everybody's going to think we're nuts too if we try to tell anybody about this." Foxy laughed. There wasn't much humor in it. "I don't know that that's going to be a problem." I sighed. "Yeah," I said, "I know." I slid down on the floor and rubbed Bongo's ears. He thumped his tail. We sat there in the silent room for what felt like years. I suppose it was probably hours, although it might have been less. Bongo stretched out and went to sleep. Well, why not? He'd had a long, exciting day, full of running and climbing and scary things, and then somebody came along and enchanted him to make him feel better. I'd want a nap, too. It was a lot for one elderly coonhound. It was a lot for one 30-something woman. The stone walls, muffled sound. We didn't hear our captors approach until the door began to open. Bongo raised his head from his paws and gave a brief whine. It was Anna, flanked again by effigies. I couldn't make out which ones these were. The shadows were thick around them, and all I could see was the occasional gleam of wire. Anna spoke to them over her shoulder. "I will tell the prisoners of their fate." They tapped and clicked at her. She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. Foxy and I stared at her. She stood before us, inhumanly tall, inhumanly pale, her eyes full of red gleams. Then she took 3 steps forward and sank down to her knees. "You have to help me get out of here," hissed Anna. "Please." Foxy said, "What?" This was maybe not the most intelligent response, but it summed up my thoughts pretty well. "Please," said Anna in a low, urgent voice. Crouched on the floor, something seemed to change in her face. She was still pale, but not like a corpse, and her eyes were plain brown, no longer flecked with red. Was that some kind of illusion? A glamour, like they used to call spells back in the day? Or is this the illusion? Is she trying to look more human for us? "They can't hear us in here, I don't think, not with the door closed," she said. "At least I don't think they can, but it's hard to tell. They don't react to things like we do." "Are you, in trouble?" I asked, thinking that whatever trouble she was in, we were probably in much worse straits, and if anything, we should be asking her for help. She pushed her hair back from her eyes. "Yes, it's bad. This isn't a good place." "I noticed," I said. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "You would have, I imagine. I don't even see it anymore. You get used to everything, except sometimes the puppets do things that no one could get used to." "The puppets?" I asked, although I was pretty sure I already knew. "The bone and stick things?" She nodded. "Uriah says they used to be shaped more like people, but he's been here too long. Much longer than me, and I've been here for years. I don't know how many years. I know it's been a long time. It was winter of 73. Foxy and I looked at each other over her head. Anna looked to be at most in her early 30s, and only if she'd been really relentless about skincare and exercise. "It's been a while," said Foxy kindly. "What happened to you? Wandered in here, did you?" "Ugh," Anna put her face in her hands. "I was so stupid. We'd go out in the woods behind my cousin's place and smoke grass, try to raise our consciousness, you know. And then one day a woman showed up while I was high, and I actually asked her if she was my spirit guide. Can you imagine?" Whatever I was expecting from the Holler people, it wasn't this. "Ah," I said. Foxy had no such qualms. "Hell, hon, I was tripping balls one night and asked a cop if he was my daddy. It happens." Anna nodded. "She was the one before me. She brought me back here. Then she left, that bitch." "You can't leave?" I asked. "Not for good. The puppets will let me go out for a bit, but they watch me. If I try to leave, they—" She swallowed. Whatever she was going to say, she apparently thought better of it. "They bring me back," she said. I pictured long twig fingers closing over my arms, a deer bone effigy picking me up and carrying me back to the place of stones, and shuddered. Something snapped suddenly into focus, now that she was no longer so tall and pale. "Wait," I said. "You were in the woods. I saw you. You're the hiker." Anna nodded. "I've been watching you," she said, "to see if you could help me. But you didn't look like—" I waved my hands, trying to express tall and pale and red-eyed all at once. "It's nothing," she said. She waved her hand, and suddenly her eyes shone the color of brake lights. I recoiled, and then they were brown again. "A little magic, like the charm on your dog, so that people don't have a freak-out." Have a freak-out, I thought. I can almost hear the 70s. "I used to come out and see Frederick." She shook her head sadly. "I don't think he understood what I was trying to tell him. He kept trying to warn me. I told him it was too late, but, well, Frederick, she means Cockgrave. Oh, he mentioned a girl in the woods. I hadn't connected the hiker to Cotgrave's girl in the woods, but how could I? There were a lot of people in Ponsborough. It's not like you expect any of them to be magically concealing the fact that they're 7 feet tall and the color of ice. I think he was pretty far gone by the end, I said. Anna nodded. He couldn't help me, she said. You were the one who sent the note? And Drew Kilroy was here on it? She petted Bongo. Yes, he used to draw it. I didn't know if you knew him, but I thought you might recognize it. I tried not to sound accusing, but I'm pretty sure I failed. I came because of the note, because you asked for help. And instead you captured me, us, and locked us up in here? Well, I didn't expect you to just walk in. I thought if you'd found the place of stones, you must know something about how things worked. Foxy gave a short bark of laughter. No, I said. My dog wandered into it one day, and then things started to go really sideways. Anna stopped petting Bongo and shoved her hair out of her eyes. You're not one of them, then? One of us? What? Part hidden folk. They go out and get children on ordinary folk. My father was one. That's why they wanted me here, but you're not one, are you? I raised my eyebrows, thinking of my dad and the roughness in his lungs. Jesus, no. My dad's an actuary. I don't know why I added that last bit, except that it seemed like being an actuary was the diametric opposite of being a holler person. Anna looked as if she might scream. But you have to be. Frederick was one. He what? I said. He was one of us. Generations back, but there was a little bit there. How can't you have it? I blinked at her stupidly. He was my step-grandfather. Mine died in his 30s. Anna collapsed onto the stone bench. This is awful. I was getting a little fed up with her assumptions. It was looking like this was at least partly her fault. You could have asked, or, not captured us. She shook her head. I tried to keep everyone else out, but you. I thought you could help me. Foxy lifted her head. That's why it felt like the place was trying to keep me out. I tried, Anna repeated, sounding almost petulant. Once you were in the place of stones, the puppets were going to bring you back no matter what. I had to make it look good. They're already suspicious of me. At least I think they are. Who knows what goes on in their heads? Don't you? Asked Foxy mildly. Anna gave a high, humorless laugh that made the hair rise on the back of my neck. Bongo jumped. I slid down on the floor and hugged my dog, feeling a territorial urge to claim him as mine, not hers. The hickory beads around my neck got tangled up in his collar, and as I wrapped my fingers around them to pull them loose, I had a strange sense of double vision. Anna, still looking like a hippie, with human eyes and human skin, and then behind that, as if through a frosted glass, Anna with red eyes and skin whiter than any white woman on earth. Which one is real? I dropped the beads against my chest. The vision faded, even though the beads were still touching the back of my neck. Perhaps the hickory was only strong enough to show me the glamour if I was holding it tightly. Anna hunched up one shoulder in a shrug, unaware of any of this. Look, I need your help. I have to get out of here. It's been too long. I can't do what they want. It's not working. I used to at least get pregnant, but now that doesn't even work anymore. If she'd sounded like a grieving mother, I think I would have tried to say something sympathetic, but she didn't. She sounded irritated. And I know people are complicated and grieve in their own ways and all that, and maybe it wasn't even grief anymore, but that was one more strange thing going on. I'm not judging. This whole situation was beyond anything I understood. We'll help you get away if we can, I said, which was a stupid thing to say, given that we were locked in a stone cell and she had free run of the place. But there's poppets at the house, too. If they come after you, won't they just come to the house? The house, maybe. Anna dipped her head. But if I can get far enough away, they'll give up. I'm sure they'll give up. They have to give up. I wasn't so sure. But I also wasn't going to argue with her. Her eyes were doing a very unsettling thing where they flashed red, then remembered they were supposed to be brown, but then the red would start seeping through again. What about the others? I asked. The other holler people. Won't they try to stop you if you leave? What? It occurred to me that she might not know what I meant by holler people. The hidden people, like you and the old man. Anna stared at me, then gave another high, unsettling laugh. There aren't any others, she said. He and I are the only ones left. There aren't any others? I repeated stupidly. What? How is that possible? You've got a whole city here. Even as I said it, I remembered how silent the city had been as we'd walked through it, how the only movement had been the effigies. At the time, I thought that perhaps the others were sleeping or watching us from the shadows. Perhaps the truth was that there was no one left to watch. But if that was true, then where were the effigies coming from? Somebody was building them. Was it Anna? Or the other man, Uriah? Now, there's an old-fashioned name. I wonder how long he's been in here. An old-fashioned name, like Ambrose, for that matter. Ambrose destroyed the White Stone, but there was another one here. Cotgrave knew about the Holler people when he was in Wales, and the narrator in the Green Book talks about them, so there had to be more. Are there other cities? I asked. In other places? Anna gave me a startled, appraising look. I don't know, she said. Uriah said something about that once, but he rambles. Nobody ever comes from them, if there are. Something rattled against the door. Anna stiffened. She rose to her feet. It looked for a moment as if she stood in a light that no one could see, as her skin bleached whiter and whiter and her eyes grew strange. I'll come back, she whispered. The Poppets will want to take you to the building next. I'll try to put them off, but if I can't, be ready. Later. She opened the door. A wall of mown and rags and twigs stood behind it, moving restlessly. Anna stepped outside, head held high. Your cooperation has been noted, she said. We will speak again. She shut the door behind her and was gone. Holy crap, said Foxy. This is getting weirder and weirder, I said. What do you think is going on? Not a damn clue, said Foxy. She jerked her chin toward the door. Not real keen on her. I feel bad for her, but something stinks. Yeah, I said. I wanted to feel bad for Anna, who was clearly a victim of something, but there was a wrongness to her that I couldn't put my finger on. It reminded me of the narrator of the Green Book, that same feeling that I knew I was supposed to pity them, but I mistrusted them instead. Well, Anna had hauled me into a situation I had no idea how to fix, and she hadn't apologized, she just seemed annoyed. I was probably justified in being a little annoyed myself. There was just something off. Off, I thought bitterly. Yes, you're surrounded by monsters, trapped underground, but something is off, and you're still brooding because you didn't think the narrator of the Green Book was likable enough. Bongo liked Anna. But that didn't mean much. She'd put a spell on him. And anyway, Bongo liked everyone except for the UPS guy. And maybe he'd like the UPS guy too, if he could do magic. I wished I knew what it was that was nagging at me. Then I'd know if I should pay attention to the feeling or ignore it. Of course, how was I supposed to pick out a subtle wrongness when I was being held in a cell by stick effigies under an empty city that was somehow in the hills behind my dead grandmother's house? Yeah, no, we're way past subtlety. She isn't acting right, though. The way the narrator in the Green Book didn't act quite right. If you'd been held prisoner by effigies for decades, getting pregnant from a rock, how the hell would you act? But why did she care that I wasn't one of the Holler people? If I was going to help her escape, what did it matter? Do you think there's really no other Holler people? Foxy shrugged. Didn't see any. Of course, that doesn't mean anything. And you're right that maybe there's none here, but there's some somewhere else. Maybe the effigies are getting made somewhere else in another city. Cotgrave must have seen one in Wales and then ran across the sea and moved into a house with one in the backyard. There's irony for you. Maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe he couldn't get away from them. Do you think this is a trap? I asked, my brain a whirl of thoughts. Cotgrave drawn to my grandmother, whom he clearly despised. Cotgrave drawn to the house, not leaving even once it became clear that the Holler people had found him. Cotgrave trapped. And now we were trapped. Foxy raised a carefully drawn eyebrow. If it's a trap,
She already sprung it. She's got us in a jail cell. Why come in here and lie to us about it? I grunted. After a minute, I said, if there's no holler people, who the hell is making the effigies? Or the poppets, or whatever she called them? Maybe that old guy, said Foxy. He looks like the sort who'd stick a wasp nest on a pig's body and call it a day. Uriah, I said. When was the last time you heard of somebody named Uriah? Sunday school, I think. He was a Hittite or a Levite or a Sodomite or whatever. She considered this. Well, maybe not a Sodomite. I'm not judging, I considered. Do you think he could have made all of them? If I was immortal and bored, I'd probably get up to a whole lot of mischief. You think he's immortal? I think that Anna girl sure as hell doesn't look like she was a teenager in 73. I sighed. What do you think she meant about getting pregnant? Foxy considered this. Sounded a bit like somebody wanted her to have kids, but she couldn't anymore. Said something similar when she caught us, didn't she? I have borne 7. 5. Drew no breaths. Hell, Foxy said, if I was stuck here with nobody but that old Uriah guy and a bunch of walking twig monsters having babies, I'd want to get the hell out of Dodge myself. I snorted. This exactly echoed my thoughts, and she wasn't wrong, but still, why trap us? Why call for help when we pretty clearly weren't competent to give it? No, it wasn't us. It was me. She tried to keep Foxy out, remember? Why were the effigies staring in my windows anyway? We didn't have enough information, and that was all there was to it. We sat in silence. Bongo went back to sleep. You still got those sandwiches? How can you possibly want to eat at a time like this? Look, being terrified makes me hungry. I dug in my pack and pulled out the Tupperware container. As soon as it was open, the smell of tuna and mayo hit me, and I was suddenly ravenous. Told you, said Foxy smugly as I shoved down 2 sandwiches. 10 minutes later, I was so tired I started to wonder if the tuna salad had been drugged. Perfectly normal, said Foxy. Look, we ran like hell, and then we got marched through the streets scared out of our wits. The adrenaline's got to wear off sometime. She stretched out on the stone bench, using her backpack as a pillow. Also, neither of us got much sleep last night. I groaned. It felt incredibly dumb and dangerous to fall asleep with monsters everywhere, but it wasn't like I was going to be able to chip my way out of the cell using the Tupperware container. I know you're right, I said. It just feels wrong. And Anna told us to be ready. It's easier to run away if you're well rested. And they didn't kill us on the spot when they found us, so that's got to be worth something. You think they've got something else planned? Hun, for all I know, they're going to eat us and are trying to find the recipe book. On that comforting thought, she closed her eyes and began to snore. I climbed down and curled up around Bongo. He was a bit puzzled, but happy to be the little spoon. I put my face in his ruff and smelled unwashed dog, which shouldn't have been a comforting smell, but at the moment I'd take what I could get. I wanted to panic. I could feel the panic all through my body, as if my skin were stretched over the top of it. But I couldn't. My dog needed me, and I couldn't break down until he was safe, and that was all there was to it. Chapter 20. I must have slept for a few hours, long enough for one of the clasps on Bongo's collar to imprint itself on my cheek anyway. I sat up because Foxy nudged me. Huh? Bongo whined. Foxy nudged me again with her foot, practically a kick. I started to protest, then saw her face. She wasn't looking at me. I turned my head very slowly. The door was open, and the doorway was full of effigies. I crab-walked backward on one hand and both feet, dragging Bongo with me. He didn't fight it. I felt the moment I hit the metal grate on the floor because my fingers separated and a bar slammed into the space between my ring and middle finger with all my weight behind it. It was excruciating. I barely noticed. The effigies stared at us, eyeless. They weren't moving.
I could see one of the headless, humpbacked ones, and the one with the mud dauber nests on its back. There were others behind it, but I couldn't make out where one ended and the next began. They filled the doorway and the hall, as far back as I could see, a river of sticks and stones. And broken bones, sticks and stones, and I twisted myself around like the twisted ones. My shoulder hit the wall behind me. I could feel the metal bars digging into the backs of my legs. Bongo put a paw in a gap and slipped, then recovered. And the effigies just stood there, watching. Their shadows painted the ceiling of the corridor, unmoving. Very far away, muffled by the strange stone, I heard tapping sounds. Maybe that's the ones in the back saying, "What's going on? I can't see." I shoved my hand in my mouth to muffle whatever came out next. Hysterical laughter or screaming, I had no idea. With my other arm, I dragged Bongo's head down against my chest as if he were a small child, and I was trying to keep him from seeing something terrible. He let me do it. Dogs never let you do that. Dogs didn't belong here, under the Voorish dome. People didn't either. I heard a click beside me. It wasn't a twig and bone click. It was the sound of a gun being cocked. "Foxy?" I didn't turn my head. "I got 6 bullets, she said. Her voice was absolutely flat, and she wasn't talking to me. "I doubt y'all are gonna let me reload, but the first 6 could be interesting." I tore my eyes away from the doorway and saw that she had a gun leveled in front of her. It looked gigantic, but that didn't mean anything, since any gun looked gigantic as far as I was concerned. I wanted to ask her a question like, where the hell did that come from? Or maybe, why didn't you shoot somebody before we ended up in a prison cell? But it didn't really seem like the time. The effigies didn't move. They didn't retreat. They didn't advance. They didn't even seem to notice. None of them had eyes as I understood it. They had hollows and sockets and empty places full of darkness. I still couldn't shake the feeling that they were studying us. Foxy's wrists were starting to shake with the strain of holding the pistol up, but she never moved. And then, finally, minutes or hours later, I couldn't begin to tell you, the effigies began to leave. I saw the shadows ripple on the walls as they walked away. Some of them didn't even bother to turn around. They just reversed their limbs and began to move in the opposite direction, the corridor filled with tick, tick, tick noises. The mud dauber effigy tilted its head at me. Its head was a couple of sticks tied together with twine, not even solid, just a vague V-shape that might have been a muzzle, and more mud dauber wasps coming out the back, all bundled together like a pan flute. It reached out with its forelimbs and pulled the door shut. Foxy exhaled all at once and let her arms drop. She did something arcane with the gun and put it back into her backpack. "Foxy, where did that come from?" "My grandmama. She said if I was going to date boys, I should always carry cab fare and a condom." "That is not a condom, Foxy. And if any of them gave me trouble, I was to whip that piece out and show him that mine was bigger than his." I digested this for a moment. "Interesting woman, your grandmother." "Yeah, she was something else. Anyway, I've had it in my backpack the whole time." "Why didn't you pull it out when we were on the hillside?" She snorted. "And how many of them do you expect me to shoot? I ain't Annie Oakley. I can't line up 10 of those things with one bullet." She frowned. "I admit I did think a bit about taking that Anna woman hostage on the spot, but when people are throwing uncanny shit around, I ain't inclined to return fire. Seemed pretty likely that I'd just get myself killed and then you and your puppy'd be here all alone. Figured it'd be better to keep it for the last resort." Bongo heard the word puppy and tugged his head out of my armpit, wagging his tail. I wish I had 1/10 of the emotional resilience of a dog. I exhaled slowly. Well, I guess they know you've got it now. I couldn't believe how prepared she was, particularly in contrast to how unprepared I was. You ever think about joining the FBI or the CIA or something, Foxy? I looked into it once, but apparently they want you to have finished high school. Shame. That's what the nice agent said. He was a sweet boy, made me breakfast in the morning and everything. I examined my left hand. The webbing between my fingers had turned an angry red, and there was a jarring ache through my hand. I squeezed various bones, and nothing made me scream in agony, so it probably wasn't broken. Not that I could have done a damn thing about it if it were. At least it was the left. I can type, hunt and peck style, with my right hand if I have to. You know, in case I had to do any copy editing while I was sitting in the Holler People's prison. It's interesting, said Foxy slowly. I looked up. They came here without any of the Holler people. Anna said there weren't any more, I said. Yeah, she said. I ain't saying she's a liar exactly, but she's been leaving some bits out. Well, we've had one 5-minute conversation, I said, determined to be fair if it killed me. Not that I think you're wrong. Yeah, she nodded, but if she's not telling them what to do, who told the things to come stare at us? I blinked. I hadn't thought of it. The first effigy, the deer skull one, had been staring in my window, and I'd come to think of it as just a thing they did. And why? I said. What were they looking for? Foxy shrugged. And the building. I could practically hear the capital letter when Anna had said it. Foxy shrugged again. I put my arms around Bongo again and wondered if we'd ever get answers, or if finding out the truth was going to be even worse. What time do you think it is? I asked. How the hell should I know? She jerked her chin toward the door. Listen up. Something's going on out there. I listened. Even through the muffling silence of the door, I could faintly hear an angry raised voice and clacking sounds. It was coming closer. I wrapped my arms around Bongo. He quieted a little, but I could still hear the whine down in his chest at the bottom of every exhale. A final angry shout. A clatter of bone and metal. The door opened. Anna came through and shut it behind her. Her eyes were as red as taillights. Get up, she said. What's going on? I gripped Bongo's collar tight. It's the Poppets. They're going to take you to the building. I swallowed. Why? To get a look at you, I suppose. They've been coming to the house, I snapped, staring at me through the windows. Haven't they had a good enough look already? She shook her head, her hair whipping in frustration. Who knows why they do what they do? But I thought your people made them. I remembered the passages in the Green Book, the Lady Cassop making a poppet, the clay men that the narrator made. Surely they were the same things, or something like them. Anna gave a short, grinding laugh. What? I've never made one. That old guy, then, said Foxy. Uriah. Him? Scorn dripped from Anna's voice. He can't do much more than stare and mumble. He's been here for centuries, one of the last of the real old bloods, for all the good it does him now. No, he's not making them. Then where do they come from? It doesn't matter, she whispered furiously. Listen to me. We have to go now. She looked over my head at Foxy. Afterward, we have to run. Do you understand? The building's near the edge, and they always stay together for a little bit after, so there'll be fewer of them. After what? I asked. She ignored me. I'll distract them, she said. Be ready. After what? Finally, she glanced at me. Ugh, I don't have time. You'll see. Eventually, I nodded. So did Foxy. We hear you, said Foxy grimly. Anna yanked the door open again. A corridor full of clicking shadows looked in at us. Far back, I could see Uriah surrounded by made monsters. Anna never faltered. She lifted her chin, inhumanly tall and inhumanly pale, and walked forward. The poppets parted to let her pass. Well, said Foxy softly, rising to her feet. "I guess if we don't want them to drag us, we'd better follow her." I expected to take the long corridor to the surface again, but we did not. Instead, we turned and turned again until I was thoroughly lost. These corridors were better lit, which was, well, I don't know if that was good or not. There were oil lamps every few yards, the niches alternating between the left and right side. Each splash of light illuminated carvings that rippled and swirled on the opposite wall. Either the magic on Bongo was starting to wear off, or there were too many effigies around us because he began to turn his head and look at them, his forehead wrinkling. I could see him trying to think. Normally, he doesn't devote that much mental energy to anything that doesn't involve food. I was not having an easy time of it myself. It was light enough in the corridor that I could see them clearly. I don't know if that was more frightening than blurry, indistinct shapes in the dark or not. There also seemed to be more of them than before, or perhaps they were just walking more closely. That's it. They're moving like they have somewhere to be. The building. I tried to picture what it could be. Another of these gray stone boxes? A gigantic factory turning out twig and skull creatures on an assembly line? "Quit poking me," Foxy growled to something behind her. "I ain't moving any faster in these heels." "How are you not having a complete breakdown?" I asked her. I heard myself laugh as I asked it, which I hadn't intended to do. Panic was starting to claw inside my chest as if one of the effigies had crawled in there and was trying to carve their way out. "That's a lovely mental image, and so helpful right now." Foxy snorted. "Was in some protests back in the day, and the cops came to bust it up. These days, if I ain't being tear-gassed, I figure I'm doing okay. Keep walking, hon." She gave me a little shove in the back. I hadn't even realized that I was slowing down. "Plus, I took half a Valium earlier," she added. "And you didn't share?" "Well, I figured one of us needed to be sober in case we needed to drive." "Not a lot of cars around here, Foxy." She sniffed. "There's a thing over there. Got a muffler for a rib cage. Looks like somebody tried to make a Greyhound, then got bored halfway through. I don't think we can drive away on a muffler." "Not by itself. But I mean, we get enough of these things together, we might be able to build a car out of spare parts." "Did you ever see that old show, The A-Team?" "Pfft, hun, I saw it when it aired." There's that episode where they get locked in a barn and turn a tractor into a tank that shoots cabbages. I yield to nobody in my love of Mr. T, but that one might have been a tad unrealistic. She considered this. Although, they lock us in with an arc welder, and I might work something out. Listening to Foxy's outrageous comments kept me walking. If Anna heard them, she gave no sign. Our procession slowed gradually until it seemed like we were moving at a crawl. I looked forward and saw that ahead of Anna, Uriah was walking very slowly, his hands on the backs of two effigies that flanked him. Somehow the sight of a human, or something human enough, willingly touching one of the things made my stomach churn. I turned to the carvings on the walls to keep from looking at Uriah's monsters. These carvings did not look like mere ornamentation. There were figures that looked human, very tall, always facing the viewer with a great curved shape over their head. The sky? A rainbow, rendered in gray rock? The Vorish dome? The next set of carvings had the same figures with smaller ones at their feet, like children. They reminded me of Egyptian carvings, how the kids always looked like the adults, only half the size. We passed a half-dozen more carvings, all of them similar, except that the human figures were doing different things with their hands. Maybe an art historian could have made sense of it. I had the feeling that there was a great deal of information there if only I had the ability to decipher it. One had the figures holding a baby, which was actually proportioned more or less like a baby, which made me wonder if I'd been wrong about the small figures being children. Representation of a royal family? A ruling class and the others were peasants? Had I discovered holler people feudalism? One of them was definitely a burial. I remember that one clearly. The human figure was lying down, wrapped in some kind of shroud. Something stood at its head, like a human with a bird's head, or maybe some kind of mask. The small figures covered their faces, backs bent, as if in terrible grief. The one after that had only the small figures, no large ones. Children? Whose parents had died? A population with a dead king? The next carving had the small figures holding up a baby, and then it went back to the same sets as before. Big figure, small figure, domed sky. You seeing these, Foxy? Yep. And? Kinda reminds me of that stuff in pyramids. Or the others, the big winged bulls. Assyrian? Don't you swear at me. We left the corridors through another door in the hillside and stepped into the dead city. It had grown dark. That surprised me somehow. I thought we were beyond day and night here. Nevertheless, the clouded sky had darkened to the color of cold liver. The air was cold. Lamps had been lit in the city, but strangely. I don't know why, but you expect streetlights to be regular. All at the same height, more or less evenly spaced. You expect it so much that you don't even think about it. You look up and notice immediately when a streetlight is out, because part of you knows that there is supposed to be a light right there. The lights were set up wrong. They looked like some kind of cloth lanterns, but they were tacked up haphazardly. One building would have 3 of them, and then there would be a long stretch of darkness. 2 would be at chest height, and the next dozen would be on the 2nd story. I'd say that it was unsettling, but I was a long way past unsettled. The holler people were gone. Anna had said, had the effigies done it? Did it have some esoteric significance? Or had they just been given an order to put up lights from here to here without any innate understanding of how lights even worked? Isn't that interesting? Whispered the little voice. It didn't really matter anyway. The lantern cloth was torn and ragged, and most of them gave off only a dim firefly glow. 1 or 2 blazed bright as day, casting shadows behind the effigies that were almost as grotesque as the creatures themselves. The panic was settling into a new phase. I felt distant and disassociated. I could hear all my thoughts coming from a long way off, echoing inside my head. For some reason I thought of Skip, describing the difference between his ups and downs. Could something as simple as panic have an up and a down form? One panic had felt like I was going to run screaming into the city. This one felt like I might simply sit down and put my arms over my head and wait for an effigy to kill me. Probably it was nothing like that. I wasn't bipolar. What the hell did I know about it? One of the streets we passed down widened into a kind of courtyard with a carved stone in the center. It occurred to me, looking at it, that I had not seen anything like the carved stones since we entered the city. The one here was on a raised brick dais, as if it were a piece of sculpture. The effigies slowed as we entered this courtyard, filing around the stone in a circle. Anna put out a hand, and we stood to one side waiting. Tock. Tock, tock. Tap, 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 tap. Click, click. They were making noises at the stone, turning their heads, I guess, those that had heads, moving bits of themselves back and forth. Are they worshiping it? I said. I sounded very calm. I was asking the question from very far away. Anna shrugged. The very old holler person, Uriah, looked over at me with filmed eyes and said, "They do courtesy to their makers." "What does that mean?" asked Foxy. Uriah blinked at her. His eyelids moved a little too slowly, like a lizard's. "It is what we were." He fell silent for a long moment, then added, "It was long ago." "Why here, and not up on the hill?" I asked. Uriah blinked a few more times. "This one is here." I wasn't sure if he understood me or thought he'd answer me or what. The effigies were moving. If they were human, I'd say they would be swaying, but they weren't doing it like humans would. Parts of them would move, and others would stay still. One of the effigies, the greyhound one, began to turn back on itself, crawling up and over its own hindquarters in an impossible corkscrew, and I twisted myself around like the twisted ones. They're better at it than I was, I thought, and had the urge to laugh hysterically and then perhaps begin screaming. The stone was one of the ones that I thought of as the dead ones. I stared at it. The lines didn't squirm like they had on the hill, but they still had a motion to them. It looked like a corpse wrapped in a shroud. After seeing the carved burial on the walls, I was pretty sure that I wasn't just making that up in my head. But as I kept staring, some of the carved lines seemed to resolve into a hand working its way loose from the wrappings. A shroud? Or a binding? A cocoon? I reached my free hand up and gripped the line of hickory beads. There was no strikingly obvious change, but the hand came into focus immediately. It looked like a human hand. I didn't know if that was good, bad, or just the way things were. The effigies, with no signal that I could see, unwound from the circle and began to walk forward again. I kept my eyes on the ground in front of me. I felt numb. The litany of the twisted ones kept chasing around in my head, tangled up with the corpse stone and the carving of all the little figures bent over with their hands over their faces. "Oh, hell," said Foxy, and I finally looked up. One of the immense bird's nest constructions loomed at the end of the street. It was the largest one I'd seen. It had engulfed at least one building and was leaning over the nearby ones. The entryway was lopsided and large enough to drive a car through. Effigies stood in a straggling crowd around it, but they had left a long corridor clear. "Come," said Anna in her remote voice. "We are summoned into the building." Chapter 21. I had to pick Bongo up and carry him. He would not walk into that doorway. I wanted to walk into it even less, but no one was giving me a choice. "Be ready," Anna had said. Our escape lay on the other side of what happened next. Assuming she wasn't betraying us, assuming that there was any way to betray us since we couldn't get much more captive than we were, assuming that she hadn't been lying for some strange purpose of her own. Assumption after assumption, but all I could do was go forward, not back. I could not explain any of this to Bongo, so I picked him up in my arms. He whined miserably against my shoulder. I felt as if I was betraying him. I also felt as if my back was going to give out, but surely I only needed to get him inside. After that, he'd probably be eager to leave under his own power. I walked forward through the crowd of effigies, 20 at least, maybe more. They blurred together at the edges. It felt like I was walking a gauntlet. Living junk turned its head and watched me, and everywhere I heard the soft, thoughtful clicking. "Please," I prayed, to any god that might be able to hear me in this place, "please let my dog live." Anna had said we'd make a break for it after we came out of the building. That implied we'd come out again, didn't it? It's just a building. It's probably like a temple or something. We just need to go in and then we'll come out again. Bongo can get away. He can outrun them, I bet. Foxy and I, well, Foxy's got that gun. Surely she can take care of herself, which left me as the deadweight. But I expected that. The doorway to the building loomed in front of me. It wasn't a pitch-black opening. It was gray and layered, and I could see a little way inside. When I stepped over the threshold, my feet crackled on the surface below. It looked like, I didn't know, like something oddly familiar. Handmade paper, the kind you get with bits of leaf pressed into it, or papier-mâché, something like that. The building wasn't silent. At first I thought it was bongos trembling against my chest that made it seem to move, and then I realized that there was a thrumming sound, like distant machinery. Machines? Here? It didn't make any sense. But what did in this place? Foxy stepped in behind me. "Better keep moving, hon," she said quietly. "There's a big one behind us, and I think it means business." I didn't look over my shoulder. It wouldn't do me any good to look at it. Orpheus and Lot's wife might have been unable to resist looking back, but I was done. Bongo's heartbeat raced against my chest. "It's okay," I lied to him. "It's okay. I won't let anything happen to you." The corridor was square at first. It seemed like the material had been layered over the interior of one of the stone buildings. Then it opened out into a room, rectangular but with the corners softened with drifts of the paper material. The ceiling was full of twigs, like a mass of bird nests, all woven together. It was hard to tell if the gigantic wicker structure on top had been built or had been simply grown there. There were no leaves on the twigs, but maybe that didn't mean anything. There were no leaves on the trees around the Voorish dome either. There was a second opening on the far side of the room. It was an irregular circle, and I had my doubts that it was part of the original stone building. The twigs ran down to meet it, and the odd, pulpy gray layers were built up around it. I shifted Bongo against my hip, trying to see over him so that I didn't catch my footing, and suddenly I realized what the material reminded me of. "Foxy," I said softly. "Yeah?" "This is a paper wasp nest, isn't it?" "Think so, hun, if the wasps were the size of horses." This was not a comforting thought, but I had pretty much given up on comforting thoughts by this point. Anna stood framed in the circular opening. She had halted. As I watched, she took a deep breath, lifted her head, and stepped forward. We followed. Bongo had gone completely limp. I heaved him up so that his paws were on my shoulder and I could take more of his weight on my hip. If his heart hadn't been hammering against my collarbone, I would have worried that he was dead. The circular tunnel sloped upward and was ribbed like a throat. That was another thought I wished I hadn't had. I wanted to slow down, but Foxy was right behind me, one hand on my backpack, and I knew something had to be right behind her. It went around and around like a spiral staircase. It wasn't as dark as it should have been. The paper let light through, maybe, or reflected it differently. The air was full of diffuse gray light, like the horizon just before dawn. There were carvings on the walls here, too. I say carvings. Bas-relief made of paper? Sculpture? Something like that. Easier to carve than stone, I suppose. The same as inside the corridors, the tall figures, the small ones at their feet. Not all the small figures were human. Some of them looked like dogs or goats or maybe horses, some kind of four-legged animal, but scaled down, all of them walking up alongside us in a great spiral, the large ones getting fewer and fewer, the small ones continuing on. Ahead of us, the tunnel opened up. Anna paused in the tunnel mouth. There was a light source in front of her, turning her into a black paper cutout. I didn't want to touch her, but I was being pushed ahead, so I cleared my throat. She stepped to one side and I came out, carrying my dog, into the heart of the building. You think really stupid things when you're horrified beyond belief. In this case, I thought, of course, building. You think it's a noun, but it's also a verb. That's what was happening here. Building. The nest rose up on all sides over a vast open space. We stood on the roof of the stone building and looked over the edge. The effigies had sheared down through what had once been a street, and the building continued for an unknown distance below. It didn't fall away into darkness, though. Darkness would have been an improvement. The pit was filled with material, a mound of junk, of twigs and bone, and discarded wire, skulls and pebbles, feathers and dead leaves. And it was alive. The surface rippled like a pregnant animal's sides. Heaving with contractions, effigies picked their way across the mound like water bugs skating on the surface of a pond, tugging bits loose, binding them together. I watched two creatures like praying mantises with cow skulls for heads, working on a pile of clay that moved and squirmed under their claws as they wrenched it into a shape I couldn't begin to fathom, then jabbed sticks into it, sticks and stones and broken bones, while it writhed in what looked like pain. We'd wondered who made them, and suddenly it was obvious. They were making themselves. I thought of the white people in the Green Book, the holler people making poppets to serve them. The holler people, having children with ordinary humans, and the white stone, growing fewer and fewer as their blood grew thinner and thinner. The human figures, surrounded by smaller ones, not children, but their servants, made things and the ones who made them. And one day the holler people were gone, but their servants remained, and the servants began to replace themselves over and over. The poppets building poppets of their own, growing farther and farther removed from any human hand. The small figures walking up the spiral, no longer human or animal, continuing on and on and on, alone. "Look up," said Foxy softly, "or maybe don't." I looked up. Hundreds of effigies hung from the top of the nest, the way the deer skull effigy had hung from the tree. They dangled on the ends of ropes like silent wind chimes. Anna walked to the very edge of the roof. The two humped, headless ones flanked her like an honor guard. She said, "I have brought the interlopers." I didn't know what to expect next. For the mound to start talking, for it to open monstrous eyes and roll over and be an effigy made from the bones of giants, for the ground to open up and swallow us whole. None of those things happened. If they had, I would probably have broken right there. Instead, the effigies behind us fanned out around us. More and more streamed through the doorway, the entire crowd that had been around the building, a hall of wire and bone horrors. The ones working began to slow. The praying mantises paused in their assembly, holding the twitching headless body of their child between them. The ones hanging from the ceiling began to sway. Clicking echoed from all around us. The praying mantises tapped their long twig fingers on their hollow skulls. Hagstones rattled in the rib cages of the hanging ones. The mud dauber effigy stood closest to me and shuddered its body so that the mud tunnels chattered together like teeth. I didn't ask what they were doing because this, too, was blindingly obvious. They were talking. Sticks and stones, sticks and stones, sticks and stones, and talking bones. A rattled discussion went on all around us, click, 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 like the voices of monstrous insects, giant cicadas humming in the heat. Anna folded her arms in front of her and listened. "What are they saying?" I croaked. "The poppets are deciding whether to keep you," she said. "They can't do that." My voice sounded very calm and conversational, as if I could convince Anna and the effigies that holding us prisoner was some kind of social faux pas. "The alternative is to take you apart for materials." Foxy swore. The clicking grew louder and more agitated. The ones swaying from the ceiling began to clatter together, introducing discordant notes. A heated discussion? Did they have emotions? Did they get angry, happy, sad, frightened? Did it matter? "The newer ones say that you can perhaps be bred to make more masters," said Anna. "The old ones say that they must wait for better stock. Masters bred from your flesh will be weak, even with the white stone, as mine have become weak. The newer ones say that even those can be used for materials." If I had not had Bongo in my arms, I might have panicked. Things were going a bit gray around the edges. They were talking about using me as a broodmare for however long someone lived under the Voorish dome. But I had Bongo, and I couldn't panic because I had to take care of him, even if the flesh under discussion was trying to crawl off my body in sheer disgust. The dog and the old one will be made into bones, she continued. Her voice was flat and emotionless. They will be given the task to guard you. It is, her voice acquired some faint sheen of emotion, one I couldn't place, an honor. I looked at the two headless effigies beside her. It occurred to me that they walked beside her nearly every time I saw her, and I finally thought to wonder what had gone into their construction. Or who? I clutched Bongo against me. His eyes were closed and he was panting in the last extremes of distress. We will await your decision, said Anna to the crawling, clicking building. She turned and stalked back the way we had come, no longer stately but angry, her face flushed, eyes glinting. Is she mad that they're going to kill us? I'd have liked to think that. I really would have, but she didn't look worried. She looked thwarted. Was she hoping for something else? Hoping they'd let us go? Hoping they'd let her go? Oh. I don't know why it took me so long to realize what she intended. My only defense is that the building had been so shocking that I wasn't thinking clearly. But finally, everything clicked together in my head. Kilroy was here. Then she left, that bitch. You aren't one of us, are you? Anna hadn't really called for help. She'd called for someone to take her place, and I had blundered in thinking that somebody needed rescue, and stupid enough to think that I might be the person to do the rescuing. Me, lacking any blood of the Holler people in my veins, because Cotgrave was my step-grandfather, and that was an inelegant phrase, and we'd all stopped using it and gone to other words, and maybe he'd been too confused at the end anyway to explain, and now we were trapped in here with her. She'd talked about running, but she'd been talking to Foxy, whom she tried to keep out completely. Had she expected to trade me and be free? Had she assessed the situation and figured that it would be easier to get out with Foxy helping? That maybe the effigies wouldn't try to get her back if they had me instead? I stared at her shoulders. If she could feel my eyes, boring holes between her shoulder blades, she gave no sign. She led the way down the spiral staircase, and I wanted to turn and run in the other direction. But that way lay the effigies, and the building and the creatures copying themselves in wood and bone, waiting for their masters to return. So Foxy and I walked behind her. Uriah followed us, looking oddly lost without his escort. The two headless ones were with us. The rest of the effigies were gathered around the edge of the roof, engaging in their wordless conversation as they argued over whether to take us all apart into bones. Anna had said that fewer of them would come with us after we went to the building. This was certainly the least number I'd seen since we entered the Voorish dome. How long would it take for them to decide? Minutes? Hours? Years? I didn't want to stick around to find out. If we were going to escape, it had to be as soon as we left the building. We might never get another chance. I hoped Foxy was ready, too. Don't be ridiculous. Foxy's probably way ahead of you. You're not the one who packed sandwiches and a handgun on this little jaunt. The CIA had really missed out when they hadn't hired her. We'd probably be toppling governments on Mars by now. We reached the square room. I set Bongo down because my back was going to give out. He was shaking badly, but he lunged for the end of the leash, pulling to get out of the building. I'm with you, buddy, I muttered. I want out of here, too. I looked back at Foxy and jerked my head just a little in the direction of the door. She nodded, reached out, and grabbed Anna's wrist. Anna looked briefly startled. Her brilliant red eyes flashed human brown and back again. Foxy put her lips next to Anna's, and hissed something. Anna started to shake her head, but Foxy's grip on her wrist tightened. I could see polished nails digging into bone-white flesh. Anna gave me a look that was pure rage and then seemed to deflate. She nodded once to Foxy. Foxy released her. "She won't do anything stupid now," she muttered, stepping in front of me. "Or I'll make her wish them things had kept her." Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had worked out Anna's plan to use me as a replacement. Were we still going to run? Was she hoping that between the three of us, we could get far enough away that the effigies wouldn't find her? What was going on behind those red-brown eyes? If I get far enough away, they'll give up. They have to give up. Dear God, I hoped she was right about that. I followed Foxy, following Anna. My stomach was churning with anticipation and terror. I could hear the tapping of the headless effigies following behind Foxy. Would we run as soon as we got to the door? Outside the door? Down the street? Would Foxy give me a sign? Would I recognize the sign? Was I supposed to give her a sign? The layered paper crunched under my feet as I crossed the threshold. Anna had stopped a few feet from the opening. Bongo and I came out, and Foxy followed. I looked back over my shoulder and saw Uriah in the gloom, walking forward. Without a word, without so much as a gesture, Anna reached down and picked up something lying at her feet. It was a jagged piece of rebar. I wondered how long ago she'd placed it there, waiting for her moment. She took 3 steps forward. Her skin was bone-white, and the moire pattern blossomed around her like heat haze as she slammed the makeshift spear into Uriah's chest. Chapter 22. He fell backward. The blood was astonishingly bright on his white skin, and then he vanished into the gray shadows inside the building. My first thought was that it had been an accident. This was incredibly stupid. I think I knew, even at the time, that it was stupid. But my brain just wasn't equipped to handle a murder happening in front of me. Therefore, it couldn't have been a murder. Therefore, it was an accident. Therefore, we had to get help and call an ambulance, and I took a step toward Uriah, and Foxy grabbed my arm. My brain's frantic hamster wheel running stopped. There were no ambulances in this place. There would be no help. Anna had murdered the other Holler person in cold blood because it would make it easier to escape, or he deserved it, or she hated him for reasons of her own, and it didn't matter because Foxy was dragging me now, and Bongo was hauling on the end of the leash, and we had to run. So we ran. Bongo had his back humped and his tail between his legs, but he still moved faster than any of us, choking as he strained against the collar. I couldn't run fast enough to keep him from doing it, but I did my best. "It's all right," I gasped, as Foxy nearly stumbled trying to keep hold of me. "You can let go. I'm okay now." "Good," she said. "Gave me a turn there. Hold on to your hickory." I reached down the neck of my shirt and grabbed the string of wooden beads tighter. In my head, I saw Uriah falling back again and again. I hadn't known him. He was worse than a stranger. But it had been so fast, so irrevocable. I couldn't process it. I had to keep looking at the memory over and over, trying to make it real. Anna was a pale shape in front of us, running through the dark streets. She paused for us to catch up, her fierce eyes narrowing. "Why?" I gasped. "Why kill him?" She laughed. Her eyes flashed inhuman red. "To slow them down. They'll pay respects. They have to. It's why they exist. Now hurry." She took off again, dodging around a corner, and I ran, thinking of the small carved figures with their hands over their faces in grief. Would they mourn for Uriah? Would it buy us a little time? Probably. Probably not as much time as if the effigies had decided to take me in trade. I don't trust her, I thought. And then I would have laughed at myself if I'd had enough breath, because it didn't matter if I trusted her or not, did it? I wasn't getting any better offers. I had no idea where we were in the dead city, but I could see a line of trees ahead and above us. Was that the hillside we'd come down, from the place of white stones? Hard to tell. We came such a long way, I thought bitterly. Were we being pursued? I risked a glance over my shoulder, but the lights were too erratically placed. I didn't hear clicking, but surely the effigies couldn't be far behind. I thought we might go back on the switchbacked path, but Anna made straight for the trees, scrambling up and over a low wall. Bongo went over the wall like an antelope. I didn't. It was only about shoulder height, but I had to leap and get my arms up on it, with my dog still yanking on the leash. Adrenaline came to my rescue. I don't know that I could have done it if I hadn't been terrified and listening for pursuit. Also, Foxy got her shoulder under my ass and shoved. "Didn't know we had that kind of relationship, Foxy," I panted. "We live through this, hon. I'll even fart in front of you." We were making jokes. We were making jokes while, in the back of my mind, a man fell down with a makeshift spear through his chest, blood on white skin. We were making jokes while unspeakable things chased us in the dark. Maybe that's why we were making jokes. I leaned down and caught her arm, hauling her up. My biceps screamed, but to hell with them. Foxy teetered on the edge of the wall as one of her heels slipped, then got both feet up. I looked over her shoulder as I pulled and saw movement. "Effigy!" I croaked. Foxy swore, swung around, and drew her gun. The two headless, four-legged ones that followed Anna came into view. I heard a hiss behind me as Anna saw them. "Will bullets stop them?" I asked. "Let's find out," said Foxy, taking aim. The gunshot woke echoes in the city like birds. Anna cried out, whether in surprise or grief, I couldn't tell. The first bullet plunked into the body of the lead effigy. It staggered sideways but kept coming. Its partner took the lead, the slack fabric of the neck beginning to sway back and forth, as if something inside was reaching through. They reached the wall and stood on their hind legs. The shot had knocked a hole out of the side of the first one. It leaked rags and sand and what looked like bits of pine needle and bark chips. Foxy shot the second one in the shoulder, shattering the socket. It collapsed on that side, against the wall. The fabric began to move, more agitated, and I swore I heard something snuffling inside. "Anna?" said Foxy over her shoulder. I looked up and saw, to my astonishment, that Anna's dead white face was slicked with tears. "Do it," she said, her voice shaking. "It's the only way." Foxy emptied the clip into the effigies. She focused on the legs. They both fell, kicking feebly. The snuffling noises grew louder, and whatever was inside them began to jerk and twitch. I didn't ask what it was. I had a horrible suspicion already. 5 drew no breaths of the other 2, but we will speak of that later. We hadn't spoken of it after all. I hoped we never would. Foxy slammed the empty gun back in her purse. "Come on," she said. "They'll have heard that." We took off into the leafless forest. The ground was dry and crackling underfoot. A whole army of effigies could have been after us, and I wouldn't have been able to hear any of them over the sound of our footsteps and my own ragged breathing. Bongo was back to dragging me up the hillside. The slope was steeper than it had looked on the endless switchbacks. There was no undergrowth, though, which helped. The trees were stark black in the gray, grim light. Foxy began to fall behind. I didn't know whether to slow down or not. "Foxy? I'm still here," she said. "You want to take Bongo? He'll help pull you." "I'm busy reloading, hon, and doing that while running is violating everything my granny ever taught me, but thanks." And indeed, in a few minutes she caught back up again and damn near started to outpace my dog and me. I don't know how long we ran. Pain began to jab through my side with every step. How long would the effigies be arguing? Were they coming after us now? Were the things that hung from the ceiling even now detaching themselves, crawling over one another and down the walls in a wave of clicking, rattling horror? I looked over my shoulder and saw only darkness. Was it moving? I couldn't look long enough to tell. The footing was too uneven, and Bongo wasn't slowing down. "Anna?" I called. "Are we close?" She turned her head to answer. I heard, "Not much far," and then something crashed through the trees to our left. Bongo screamed. If you've never heard a dog scream before, you're lucky. It started like a bay, but went high and terrible. He pulled up short, and I threw myself over him, desperate to get between my dog and whatever the crashing thing was. Foxy yelled, "Get down!" But I was already down. It was probably for the best because I heard a gunshot over my head and actually felt heat hit the back of my neck. I might have been imagining that, I don't know. The muzzle flash illuminated the fan-headed effigy. I don't know how much damage the shot did. There wasn't enough light to tell. All I knew was that Foxy grabbed me by the collar and yanked me upright, and Bongo was running again, nearly breaking my neck as his leash got tangled in my legs. But we straightened out somehow, and Anna was shouting, and suddenly in front of us, a sight I'd never thought would be welcome, lay the edge of the trees and the beginning of the hill of white stones. There was no moon in the sky, but the light on the hill was cold and blue and looked more like moonlight than it looked like anything else. The stones glowed white, and the twisted carvings moved and wriggled and shifted in the corner of my eyes, as if they would come to life at any moment. My side ached like someone had jammed a knife in it, or a piece of rebar sharpened like a spear. But the sight of the hill gave me a burst of energy. We ran. "The Wicker Tunnel!" I gasped. "Back to the house!" What good being at the house was going to do to me, I don't know, except that my truck was there. If I could get to the truck, I'd throw Foxy and Anna and Bongo in it and drive until we ran out of gas. Surely the effigies couldn't chase us that far. Or if they did, I could get to other people. Other people seemed like a talisman. I'd go to a mall or a Walmart or something. Surely unholy abominations wouldn't follow me to Walmart. The white stone loomed before us. Even if I hadn't been wrapped in hickory beads, I doubt I'd have felt anything but disgust. We skidded around the edge of the depression and kept going. "On your right," said Foxy, cool as a cucumber. And I looked over and saw a dark shape running alongside us, flanking, not moving in. Foxy shot at it, missed, swore, and then managed to put another bullet in it. It fell down and rolled down the hillside. I didn't stay long enough to see if it got up again. It was easier going now. The ground was less treacherous and easier to see. Unfortunately, I was also starting to hit the last of my strength. Even Bongo was slowing down, his panting turning into a wheeze. Foxy had one hand on her chest, the other holding the gun by her side. "Foxy, don't you worry," she panted. "I ain't dying yet." "Anna, we have to rest," I yelled. She turned. She was the color of bone in the moonless moonlight, and her eyes glinted. She didn't say a word, just pointed. I looked over my shoulder and saw them. A tide of effigies poured over the hillside toward us. I couldn't see where one left off and one began, only a wave of clicking sticks and bones heaving like the sea. Suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. Bongo was surprised to find there was slack on the leash suddenly, but he didn't complain. I think at that moment in sheer terror, I could have picked Foxy up and carried her. We tore past the 3 stones lying on the ground. The litany of the twisted ones started up in my head, in time to my stride, and I twisted myself around like the twisted ones, but it didn't quite match, and my mind fell back on something else, sticks and stones and broken bones, sticks and stones and broken bones, and I heard another gunshot from somewhere, and then the wicker tunnel was right there, and I ran for it. Anna skidded to a halt in front of it. I wanted to scream at her, to demand to know why she was stopping. She had to go through. And then I saw it. The mud dauber effigy stood in front of the tunnel mouth, blocking the way. I stopped. I knew the tide of effigies was getting closer behind us, but all I could think of was Foxy and her gun. It took far too long for Foxy to arrive, and her skin had an unhealthy gray tint. Or maybe it was the unmoonlight, but she looked at the effigy and grunted and raised her pistol. Anna was looking behind us, and I didn't dare look because I knew the tide of effigies was far too close, and at any moment they were going to break over us like the sea. The gunshots sounded like they came from a long way away, or maybe I was deaf from the previous shots. Of course, I was supposed to wear ear protection, I thought vaguely, which, going back to what I said earlier about thinking very insipid things when I'm in mortal terror. The mud dauber staggered sideways and fell down. It wasn't dead. It grabbed for Bongo as he passed, and one of those long stick legs closed over my dog's haunch. I shrieked in rage and stomped down on the sticks, hearing them crunch under my boot. The mud dauber effigy made an almost mechanical buzzing noise, legs drawing up like a dying spider. But I stomped on it again, because how dare it touch my dog? Foxy was already in the tunnel. Bongo was cowering at her feet. I turned to find Anna to yell, "Go!" and something grabbed me from behind. The grip was inhumanly strong and spun me around. I looked down at my arms, expecting to see bone and twig, expecting to scream in horror. I saw hands. The tide of effigies broke around us, became a semicircle of staring, eyeless horrors, and Anna held me pinned in the mouth of the tunnel. Bongo's leash was still around my left wrist, and my arms twisted painfully backward as he tugged on it. "Take her!" she shouted. "Let me go. I'm done, you hear me? I brought you a replacement. It's not my fault she isn't good enough. I can't do what you want anymore. Now let me go." Well, it's not like I hadn't guessed. What a disappointment it must have been when I arrived, when it looked like the effigies had decided I wouldn't make a replacement after all. "They won't take me," I said. "They won't. You know they won't. Shut up." I could feel Anna's chest against my back, hear her breath rasping in and out. She was shaking violently. The effigies, by contrast, stood like statues, unmoving. For a moment, it seemed as if they were nothing but a mad artist's assemblage, nothing that had ever been or could ever be alive. Then one, then another, began to click. Anna's shaking increased until I was vibrating with it too. The clicking spread throughout the crowd, a parliament of beetles rattling their shells together. I felt something under my heel and realized I was standing on the mud dauber's leg again. And half dead, blown apart, it was still opening and closing its twig fingers. I recoiled, horrified. Anna's grip was slipping. I could feel her shaking her head. "No," she whispered. "No. Oh, no." "I can't shoot her, hon," said Foxy softly, "not without hitting you." The clicking grew louder and louder. I watched an effigy in the foreground turn its head sideways and let it ratchet backward, ticking like a clock. Bongo pulled on the leash again, and I twisted myself around like the twisted ones. There is a trick that dog owners do with a leash. You've seen it done. Very likely you've done it yourself. It's a kind of pirouette, where the dog has wrapped the leash around you and you spin to unwrap it. Otherwise, the leash is around your legs and you're hobbled and likely to fall over. Bongo's leash was behind Anna's legs. I sent him a silent apology, yanked my left arm forward so that the leash pulled tight, and threw myself backward. She shrieked and I fell. I landed on top of her. Bongo yawped in outrage. Something popped inside my wrist. The effigies took a step forward, clicking. I rolled sideways over my injured wrist. It hurt like blazes, but Anna had lost her grip on my arms. I started to crawl toward the tunnel, trying to drag the leash out from under her as I went. Foxy grabbed my shoulders, hauling me into the tunnel. Bongo was yanking on the leash, and every tug felt like someone was hitting my wrist with a hammer. Behind me, Anna began to scream. I heard Foxy emptying her gun. The report deafened me. I crawled away into the wicker tunnel, my head ringing and my wrist throbbing, trying to get to my knees so that I could pull the leash off my left wrist. Bongo barked furiously, which didn't help at all. Then, Foxy was picking me up, and I somehow got the leash transferred, and we staggered together down the tunnel. She said something, but I couldn't hear it over the ringing in my head. A long time later, it seemed to me, I realized that Anna's screaming had stopped. I didn't know when it had stopped. Maybe when Foxy had fired her gun. Leaning on each other like two drunks, in a three-legged race, we stumbled toward the bottom of the tunnel. I knew it couldn't have been more than a few minutes, but it seemed to take an age of the earth. My lungs were raw from running. A pain that I welcomed because it had nothing to do with the pain at my wrist. "Are they following us?" I asked. "Dunno, don't think so." Bongo seemed to agree with her. He wasn't running, but shuffling along, nose to the ground, a tired dog ready to go home. It occurred to me that it was a good thing he was a coonhound. A border collie would still be up on the hillside trying to herd the effigies into the proper formation. Although a border collie might have been smart enough not to go up the hill in the first place, so it was probably a wash. Why wouldn't they follow us? I wondered out loud. Maybe we don't have anything they want. No, I didn't have anything they wanted. My blood was all human, and I was no replacement for Anna. We reached the bottom of the tunnel. Our footing evened out. Bongo threaded through the opening and led us into the dark trees. "Think we can get somebody to come back here and brick this thing up?" I asked. I couldn't make out Foxy's face in the moonlight, but I felt her frown. "Not sure you can brick up a bunch of dead trees, but we can give it a go. Skip might know." We were relying on Bongo now to get us home. It was dark, and I had no idea where we were. I kept listening for the woodpecker knock of hagstones, but I didn't hear a thing. Is it over? Is it ever going to be over? At last, far in the distance, I saw a light. I'd left the back porch light on. It looked like a beacon. The real world, the normal world. Even if it was my grandmother's horrible hoarder house, it was just a dead woman with too much stuff. There were thousands of them in the real world, and it was a thing that real people dealt with. I blinked back tears. We hobbled around the side of the house. Bongo was starting to pull again. He wanted dinner. I wanted to fall down and not get up again for days, years, maybe ever. I took a step up onto the porch and stopped. The front door was open. Chapter 23. The screen was pushed back against the wall, and the inner door stood wide. The hallway was a square of darkness. "Foxy," I said quietly, "tell me that Thomas and Skip came over to the house while we were gone." "Don't know, hun." She reached into her purse and took out the gun. "Have you got any more bullets?" "No." I pulled Bongo back from the porch. "Let's go to my place," said Foxy. "Worst comes to worst, we can—" I never did find out what we could do because I caught a flash of movement over her shoulder. The deer effigy came around the front of the truck, skull gleaming white, running on all fours. I grabbed Foxy with my injured wrist and practically threw her into the house. I think I screamed something, probably "shit," or maybe I just screamed because my wrist throbbed with a deep, nauseating, "yes, something is now broken" pain. Bongo let out a low, awful growl and spun around, and I realized he was about to attack the damnable thing. I hauled him back by the collar, and somehow we all fit inside the open doorway, and I slammed the door in the effigy's face. It was the screen door. It smashed the wire mesh, tore it open, and I fell down over Bongo while it pawed through the opening, trying to get in. Foxy grabbed the inner door and kicked me hard. I had a split second of hurt confusion, then realized she was rolling me out of the way. The door hit the effigy with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a board, and then suddenly there was silence. I curled around my wrist and my dog, making small noises of agony. I needed a doctor. I needed this to not be happening. I needed the world to go back to being a place I understood. I was not going to get any of those things, so I let Foxy haul me to my feet. We stood there for a moment, in an awkward half-embrace. Her lips were bluish, and I knew that was bad, and I knew there was nothing I could do about it. She pulled my jacket off me, which was confusing. When the sleeve went over my wrist, it was up there in the worst pains I've ever felt in my life. Then she started trying to put it back on me, which was even more confusing. What do you— Zip up the jacket with your bad arm in front, she said. It ain't a sling, but it's as good as we're going to get in the next 5 minutes. I let her work the zipper. With my arm tucked under my breasts, it didn't feel good, but at least I wasn't banging it around. What do we do? I said. Wait until morning, I guess. Skip and Tomas will come over to check on us. I had no idea what time it was. I had no idea what day it was. We can call them, I said. From the landline, if we just— I heard a clattering talk, talk, talk on the glass window and stiffened. It's at the window, isn't it? Yep. I turned. The sofa still blocked most of the window, but I could see a narrow sliver of glass to one side, and the deer skull gazed at me eyelessly through it. Tap, tap. You don't want me, I screamed at the effigy. You don't want me. I can't do what you want. It tilted its awful upside-down head. I would swear for an instant the damn thing looked confused. How much individuality did they have? Had this one imprinted on me as it hung in the tree watching? Had it been separated from the others? Did it know that I wasn't able to make more of its masters? I don't know why I stared so long. I'd seen enough of the effigies to last a lifetime. But there it was, one leg raised to tap against the glass. Its ribcage looked oddly human from here. Maybe it was. Dear God, what was it made out of? Who was it made out of? The two headless ones that had followed Anna around, had they been made from the bones of her children as I suspected? And this one, I had thought of it as deer bones, but apart from the skull, I don't know a deer from a human. Cotgrave had died in the woods, and the scavengers had gotten to him. Closed casket funeral. Had the scavengers been simple animals, or something more? Who was in the effigy that looked in the window of Cotgrave's bedroom, who knocked on the front door of the house trying to get in? Trying to get back in? Of course, I whispered. You don't smash the windows of your own house. You tap on the glass and wait for someone to let you back in. Foxy gave me a worried look. You lost me, hun. It's Cotgrave, I said. That effigy? It's made of Cotgrave. It's got to be. Your granddaddy had a deer's head? Okay, not just of Cotgrave. I shook my head. But that's why it keeps trying to get in. It doesn't want us. It wants to come home. I hope you're not suggesting we open the door and let it in, said Foxy. I shook my head. I wasn't quite that far gone. But what would it do? A little voice whispered in my head. Would it attack you? Was it even trying to attack you in the woods? Or did it recognize its granddaughter and was trying to keep you from going up the hill? Maybe it would just go to Cotgrave's bedroom and curl up on the bed, sit in his favorite chair and read the paper. I bit my knuckle to keep from breaking into hysterical laughter. "Come on," said Foxy. "Just like last time, we just gotta wait until it goes away. Then we'll call Skip and Tomas and—" Bongo began to growl again. She made an exasperated sound. "Buddy, you're not helping." "Yeah, Bongo. Just ignore the monster at the door. That monster is old news now." I reached down to put my hand on his head and realized that he wasn't facing the door. He was facing down the hallway. "Foxy," I said quietly. She turned to me, and I pointed. In the shadow of the hall, something moved. I remembered suddenly the way that there had seemed to be two effigies chasing us in the tunnel. I remembered the building and that the effigies could reproduce themselves. I remembered these things much too late. That movement was our only warning before an effigy erupted from my grandmother's doll room. If it had been made entirely out of doll parts, I would probably have stood there and laughed, high-pitched and awful, while it took me apart. It would have been too much, too horrible, too movie monster cliché. The killer doll, the China doll with the long fingernails and the murderous expression. But the effigy was made out of many more things. Cotgrave's effigy had constructed it. Lovingly, vengefully, who knew, out of the remnants of his dead wife's hoarding. Maybe that was why I saw it so rarely. Maybe it wasn't hiding during the day. Maybe it was busy working. The hoarding effigy was a papier-mâché of old newspapers, layered like the building itself, furred with bits of cardboard boxes and old bottles of cleaner. There were doll parts, yes, dozens of them, little plastic limbs making up a ribcage built of bright pink severed legs, but they enclosed a jumble of wire, coat hangers, and broken plates. The ancient typewriter had been broken apart, and the letters, with their metal shafts, made claws that gouged the floor and tore the carpet runner into long, stringy threads. I screamed. Foxy swore. Bongo's growl erupted into a high, awful bark, the sound of a dog desperately calling for help that he knows isn't going to come. I hauled Bongo back by the collar into the kitchen. We couldn't go out the door because the other effigy was there, and the back door was closed off, and I knew we were trapped, like rats. I knew it, but I didn't know where else to go. The hoarding effigy had no such concerns. If it hadn't skidded when it hit the linoleum, I imagine we would have died right there. But as soon as it reached the kitchen, its legs went sideways, and it crashed into the counter, and that brought us a small amount of time. We went up the stairs. I only had one hand, and I had to use it on Bongo, but he didn't object to running. Foxy was right behind me, knocking boxes loose and throwing them down onto the effigy. Her heart might be about to give out, but she wasn't going down alone. At the top of the stairs, one door stood open. It was the room we'd watched the effigy from, approximately 1,000 years ago. Some furniture, a man-high stack of old newspapers, and not much else. "Foxy, in here!" We slammed the door shut behind us. I set my back against it while Foxy, having two good arms, grabbed a nightstand and started dragging it over. The effigy hit the door with enough force to knock me forward an inch or two. I don't know if the metal claws made it hard to work doorknobs or if it didn't understand them, but it didn't seem to want to open the door so much as smash it down. I set my feet, trying to hold it until Foxy could get the furniture in place. This effigy did not seem interested in scaring us. This one wanted us dead. I thought of the gleeful malice that exuded from my grandmother's house and wasn't at all surprised. How could a creature made out of the essence of this place not want us all dead? "This is bad," said Foxy. "I knew it," I said. "I thought I'd put doll parts in the truck, and then there weren't any in the morning, and I thought I was nuts. But I wasn't. It took them. Cockgrave's effigy took them." "That's all very interesting," said Foxy, "but it's beating down the door, hun." "Yes, I noticed." The nightstand looked painfully fragile. I had enough space to brace the door with my good shoulder while she grabbed the other one. The doorframe rocked with the effigy's blows. I heard wood splintering an inch from my head. "Here's Johnny," I thought, and then, oh God, if only I had an axe. "We've got to get out of here," I said. "This isn't going to hold." "There's the window," said Foxy. "We can go out on the porch roof, but after that we're running real thin on options." Slam, slam, slam. Sudden silence. I could hear claws clicking as the effigy stepped back from the door. What was it doing? I heard it walking down the hall into the next room. That one had been full of junk. A regular fire trap. An idea crystallized into my head, as cold and clear as ice. This house, this fucking awful house, why had I fought so hard for it? Let the monsters have it. The only thing I cared about was my friend and my dog. Well, and my laptop, and that was still in the truck, thank God. If I did it wrong, we were going to die. If I did nothing, we were still probably going to die. "Foxy," I said quietly, "you have a lighter, don't you?" "Yeah, give it to me." She didn't ask questions, just dug into her purse and handed it over. It was an old Zippo, weighty in my hand. "You about to do what I think you're about to do, hon? Burn this place to the ground, you mean? Hey, it's your house, but I'd prefer to be outside before we do that. We'll jump down from the porch roof onto my truck." Foxy gave me a dubious look. Crack! The effigy hit the wall between us. Apparently, it had decided that drywall was easier to get through than wood. It was right. Metal flashed as its claws shredded through the wallboard. I didn't know how much space there was between studs or if there were pipes in the way, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. "The truck, you say?" said Foxy. "Get the windows open," I said. I bent down, flicked the Zippo open. God bless stupid teenage me, who had spent hours learning to flip open my boyfriend's Zippo so that I could look cool, and lit the stack of newspapers on fire. They caught with remarkable enthusiasm. I lit the carpet on fire just for good measure. The fire department could yell at me if we lived. There was a monster coming in through the wall, and I was in the top floor of a house, lighting it on fire, and what I felt was a sudden wild exhilaration. Let it burn. Let this awful place and its secrets and its nightmares and the dead I hadn't asked for and the junk I never wanted burn. The effigy got one of its arms through the wall and began tearing at the hole to widen it. I shoved the Zippo in my pocket. Foxy kicked the window screen out. I heard the crackling of the newspapers and smelled burning. It was a very cheerful, campfire sort of smell, desperately incongruous given the circumstances. I still don't know how we got Bongo through the window. I may have picked him up with one arm while Foxy pulled. But we got him out, and then I climbed out onto the porch roof after, praying he didn't take it in his head to run off the edge and break his neck and my other wrist in the process. "Now the truck," said Foxy. "After the fire's caught," I said, looking over my shoulder. "I want that thing to burn, not to be chasing us around the woods." "Can't argue with that." She eyed the distance to the truck. "Think I can make it." "Don't know how you'll convince the dog to do it, but we'll figure it out." Presumably, Cotgrave's effigy was still on the porch somewhere. It had been trying to get into the house. I just had to hope that it had gotten in, and the fire would take it out, too. Houses are supposed to catch fire really fast. In all the movies, it goes from a shorted-out Christmas tree light to flames shooting out of the roof in like 2 minutes. And you'd think this house, made of ancient materials and packed to the rafters with tinder, would practically explode into flame. We waited on the roof, and it didn't happen. I could still see the orange flicker on the walls, and obviously something inside was on fire, but my hope that the whole place would turn into an inferno and take the effigy with it was starting to fade. "Okay," I said, "let's get to the truck." The hoarder effigy hit the open window
like a freight train. Its shoulders were too broad to get through. It turned and scrabbled at the windowsill, cracking the wood, slamming into it over and over. Bits of bone flew off. I watched one of the doll leg ribs pop loose, then another, as it tried to drag itself through. Something went whoosh. I don't know what caught, but suddenly the fire was no longer an orange glow, but alive. It roared as if it was inhaling, and I heard glass shattering as the windows broke. "Come on!" shouted Foxy. I could barely hear her over the fire, but when I turned, she was standing on top of my truck, Bongo in her arms. "Get the hell out of there!" The effigy strained at the window. Another set of ribs broke off. Parts of its papery guts were spilling out onto the roof, and then a spark hit them and they too began to burn. I ran for the corner of the porch roof. Foxy and Bongo slid down into the bed of the truck, and I vaulted the gap like an Olympic sprinter. I had been secretly afraid I'd come up short, and instead I nearly went over the other side. The roof rack stopped me. There was going to be an almighty dent in the roof, but who the hell cared anymore? I flung myself into the bed, over the side, and opened the driver's side door. It seemed like an eternity while I dug for the keys. "Come on, Mouse, this is not the time to realize you've left them on the coffee table," but found them in the bottom of my pocket and slammed them into the ignition. The truck started. My beautiful, faithful truck. I slammed it into reverse, glanced behind me out of habit, and then the burning effigy landed on the hood. The truck hood dented under its weight. I didn't care about that. A truck without dents in it is probably a stupid truck anyway. But it was touching my truck. "Get it off, get it off, get it off. This is mine, this is mine. You can't touch it. It's on me. Get it off!" It glared at me eyelessly, its sides heaving as if it were panting. The plastic doll legs had charred and melted. So had most of the bottles. One burned like a star, some kind of accelerant. God only knows what. If it could get to me, I would burn too. If it could get to me, it would take me apart, and then Cotgrave's effigy would come along and build me back up out of bones, and all three of us would roam the woods together in a family, clicking and clacking with stones in our chests and ribs made of doll arms, and we could twist ourselves around like the twisted ones and lie down like the dead ones, and I slammed my foot on the accelerator. Foxy and Bongo had thrown themselves flat in the truck bed. Maybe it didn't know they were there. Maybe it didn't care. I don't know. Maybe there was something of my grandmother in it, and there was no one she hated like her own flesh and blood. I shot down the driveway in reverse while it clawed at the windshield with the typewriter keys, leaving huge scrapes in the paint and scratching the glass. It got a claw hooked under the windshield wipers, and somehow it held on even when the truck went off the driveway and hit the ditch and bounced hard. I had one hand to drive with, and steering wasn't helping. I threw the car into drive and plowed forward until I nearly hit the burning porch, then slammed on the brakes. I heard a yelp from the back, but I didn't dare stop to check on my passengers. The effigy slid off the hood and rolled in the front yard, painted orange by the flames leaping from the roof. It didn't move. I backed the truck away, leaving ruts in the yard, and then Cotgrave's effigy came down from the porch. I gritted my teeth, ready to run it down if I had to. But I didn't. It ignored the truck. It picked its way down the stairs, moving on 4 legs, down to the burning effigy. Then it curled itself up, like Bongo does when he goes to sleep, and lay down against the other one. Cotgrave and his wife, I thought, watching the flames from the hoarder effigy lick across the deer hide. Or Cotgrave and his house, maybe it doesn't matter which. The roof fell in, and I pulled down the driveway and away from that terrible, ruined house forever. Chapter 24.
Well, that is the end of the story, or at least of most of it. Once we were a few miles away, Foxy banged on the back window until I pulled over. Then she drove me to the ER and spun a story I can't even remember about squatters breaking into the house and a fire. My wrist was broken, but at least it was my left wrist, so I could still drive after they put it in the cast. Officer Bob came out to take my statement. I told him I didn't know much. I hadn't seen anybody I could pick out of a lineup. It had been dark, and Bongo was the only reason I woke up at all, and probably the only reason I hadn't died in the fire. I don't know if he believed me, but he was kind about it, and that counted for a lot. At some point, Foxy left. Thomas came and got her. I think she must have called from the ER. I kept asking if she would be okay in the house, if the house was safe now, if anything would happen. There were other people around, so I couldn't say what I wanted to, just grabbed her sleeve and stared at her. "It's all right," she said. "It's all right. They never wanted me. Ain't got the parts they need. I've been there for years and nothing's ever happened." A long time later, I thought that maybe Anna might want revenge. But by then, Foxy was long gone, and all I could do was beg Officer Bob to look in on them and make sure they were all right. Pretty much as soon as they released me from the ER, I got in my truck and drove into town. Enid took one look at me and let me sleep in the back of the coffee shop for a couple of hours. I told her there had been a fire, but I honestly didn't remember much. When I had about 5 hours of sleep in me, I drove to Pittsburgh. I stopped only at brightly lit places. Even those were too dim. I wanted the world to be lit up with halogens, with great blazes of artificial light. I wanted to see every corner of the world so I knew nothing could be hiding in it. I tuned the radio to something loud and brassy and sang along with everything, whether I knew the words or not. I got home and sat in the truck for probably an hour. Bongo was confused, but he'd gotten a cheeseburger at the last stop, so he was in a congenial mood. The DJ came on to tell us what the last song had been, and I was puzzled for a moment that I wasn't being told about how my pledge would help support quality programming like this. And then I put my forehead on the steering wheel and cried hysterically for what felt like another hour. Then I went inside and turned on every light in the house. I never told my dad the truth. How could I? The official word was that I was asleep, and somebody broke in, and Bongo woke me up. There was a struggle, and my wrist got broken, and a fire started somewhere in all the junk. Foxy was drinking out on the front porch and heard Bongo freaking out, so she came and managed to pull me out. I was still confused from being half asleep, and it was dark. No, I don't know who'd break in. No, I didn't get a good look at anybody. Dad apologized for how it had all gone down, and I told him there was no way he could have known. The doctors got him pretty well medicated right now, trying to deal with the rattle in his lungs. I don't know how much longer he's got, and I'm not going to tear up what piece he's got trying to tell him the truth. The insurance company didn't investigate the fire too hard. The place had obviously been a fire trap, and we weren't asking for money to rebuild, just to have someone with a backhoe knock the whole place down and fill in the basement. Foxy says the stone's gone. I don't know if they did that, or if it was someone else. If it really was a signpost, maybe the effigies came and fetched it back, now that they didn't need it anymore. I prefer to think it was the people with the backhoe. The insurance company sent Dad what remained from the settlement, and he sent it to me. I looked at the check, $6,000, a lot of money by my standards, and started crying. I needed the money and I couldn't keep it. Even the thought of cashing that check made me want to throw up. Anything I bought with that money would be tainted. If I tried to make a house payment with it, then my grandmother would own a little bit of my house. I couldn't do it. I tried to send it to Foxy and she refused. "I ain't gonna take money for arson, hun." I tossed and turned for 3 nights before I finally got an idea and sent the whole damn thing to North Carolina Public Radio in memory of Freddie Cotgrave. I got the tax break, and maybe that's worth something. Obviously, the Green Book was never found. If it didn't burn, it's probably buried somewhere in the pile of rubble left from the house. I've got the manuscript, though. I didn't want that either, but Tomas had been reading it back at Foxy's place when the house burned. They put it in an envelope and mailed it to me. It was a repeat of the insurance check. I cried. I wanted to throw up. I put it in the trash. I went back out and took it out of the trash. I tried to put it in a drawer, and it felt like there was a snake in the room. Every time I went into the back bedroom, I could feel it lurking there. Eventually, I rented a safe deposit box. They're not that expensive, as it turns out. Now the bank can worry about it. I suppose it goes without saying that I've pretty well lost my shit. My aunt wants me to see a therapist, but what am I going to tell them? There's no therapist in the world who will believe the truth, and I don't want to have to sit and lie to someone for $60 an hour. Hell, how do you tell someone, I nearly spent the rest of my life giving birth to monsters in a city full of walking sticks and bones? They'd have you on antipsychotics so fast that your head would spin. And that wouldn't help. I wish to God there was a medication that would make it all go away. But if there was, maybe I'd forget to watch for holler people. Maybe I wouldn't be so lucky next time. It's better than it was. Bongo helps a lot. I can leave the house, and as long as I'm in my truck or someplace with people, I'm pretty okay. I put hickory twigs in all the windows, but that just looks like a weird decorating choice. Do you know what I think about the most, though? It's not Cotgrave's effigy, lonely and wandering the woods near his dead wife's house until he had a chance to build her up again out of parts. It's not the stones, or the Voorish dome, or the fact that there's got to be other cities out there like the one in Wales, maybe less dead, full of the holler people and their servants. It's the linoleum in my grandmother's kitchen. When the hoarder effigy reached the kitchen, it skidded. Its feet nearly went out from under it. That's probably the only reason we made it to the stairs. 3 whole lives hinging on shitty 70s linoleum. If she'd left the original hardwood, we'd be dead. Everybody talks about how awful it is that people cover up the nice wood floors in houses, and it turned out to save my life. I feel like the world must be full of things like that. Stupid minor things nobody pays attention to, and then one day you pick up the umbrella stand you've been meaning to throw out and beat the killer over the head with it. Or you trip over the pizza boxes that you meant to throw out, and the killer gets you instead. Things like dog leashes or hickory beads. I still carry the beads with me. If I leave them at home, I panic and have to go back. They've become a security blanket. As long as I've got them, I can probably see the holler people coming. Foxy and I still talk. Well, text, mostly. After our little jaunt, she allowed as how a cell phone might be useful to have around, and Thomas set her up with a cheap one. She likes texting. I think she'd communicate entirely in emojis and smiley faces if she could. Skip is fine. Thomas gets hassled sometimes by people who think that anybody like him must be from another country, but that's nothing new. Foxy went on a new heart medication after Skip badgered her into it. She says it makes her cranky, but I remember how blue her lips would get, and I'm glad she's on it. No effigies in the woods. No holler people, if they're still back there, and of course they're still back there. Everything's very quiet. Why don't you move? I asked her one of the few times that we talked instead of texting. With what money? Asked Foxy. Ain't nobody gonna buy this crappy piece of dirt out here, and my Social Security ain't gonna pay for a house anywhere else. I could help, I promised recklessly. Half the time my own mortgage was a struggle, but I'd bring all 3 of them up to Pittsburgh if I had to. Nah, it's fine, hun.
No different from living by a dump or one of them toxic waste things. I keep my hickory, and I don't go walking in the woods on that side."
A long silence. I heard the soft static of the line. Even after I got my phone fixed, Foxy's connection wasn't good. I wondered if she was thinking about Anna, too. I should hate Anna for what she did. I know I should. She would have sold me for her own freedom without a second thought. But I think of what it must have been like. Walking the corridors of that dead city, seeing nothing but monsters around you. When she found out she was pregnant, was she hopeful? Did she think that maybe it would be more company than Uriah and the effigies? And what kind of monstrous midwife had attended her? What claws of bone and twig and wire reached out to catch her firstborn? Was it easier after she stopped being able to carry a child? It doesn't work anymore. I can't do what they want. Did she just stop caring? Or was she still hoping every time? Did she plead her case to the building, to the things hanging from the ceiling? Did they have a long, rattling conference about her fate? In the end, did the effigies drag her to the white stone anyway? Sometimes at night, I wake up thinking I'm her, and that if I turn my head, I'll find out that I didn't get out of the dome after all. If I open my eyes, there will be effigies around me, and the weight on my legs won't be Bongo but something made out of his bones. It takes me a long time after that to turn on the light. No, I don't hate Anna. If she hadn't called me, maybe I'd be able to sleep at night. Maybe I wouldn't think about monsters pressing against the walls of the world, effigies making more and more copies of themselves, waiting for their masters to come home, or until they overflow the hills and break through. But I still can't hate her. Sometimes I even feel guilty. Here I am, trembling and quaking in the dark, at the mere possibility of taking her place. What right do I have to be so broken when she carried on year after year, decade after decade? All those years in the dead city, and she survived. I couldn't have done that. Maybe that was the gift of her inhuman blood, that she didn't kill herself or curl into a ball and give up. The Lady Cassop, the narrator of the Green Book, said had been burned alive. And I wondered whether she cared, after all the strange things she had done. Perhaps that's what set the Holler people apart. Not the white skin and the red eyes, but the ability to be burned alive and not care, or to walk a dead city for decades and not go mad. Do you think she's still back there? I asked, trying not to think of Anna, alone, having murdered the last of her human company. Anna, not aging fast enough, part of the effigies' desperate, twisted breeding program to bring back their old masters. "No," said Foxy, slowly. "No, I think maybe she didn't make it." After she hung up, I stared at the phone and remembered how Anna's screaming had stopped after Foxy had fired her last bullets. And I knew that I was never going to ask, and thus Foxy was never going to have to lie to me about what had happened. I hoped like hell that she was right.